So, welcome back to the third and final day of the Regenerative Travel Summit. I'm Portia. You will have seen me maybe on the first day, and I was keeping a low profile yesterday. I am working at Regenerative Travel as their standard bearer, but I'm also a hotelier. And so I'm really excited about today because it has been put together with hoteliers in mind. We've got three fascinating sessions. The first one is mine, so you'll be hearing lots more about that in a moment. In an hour's time, we will then be joined by Shivani Ashoka and an amazing panel talking about social justice and how social equality, regeneration, and the environment are all connected. And then to finish the summit, and I think this is something that all of us are really intrigued by, answering the question, how do we create regenerative travelers? So if we as an industry are putting out a product, how do we now begin to engage travelers so that they are looking for the product that we are offering? So to kick things off, and I know that for our existing members, this has been kind of a hot ticket item, I'm going to introduce what are the criteria for becoming a member of Regenerative Travel. The first thing I'll say about myself is that I'm not an expert when it comes to environmentalism or social justice. I'm not a scientist. I'm barely a hotelier. I've only been at this for 5 years. But Regenerative Travel asked me to take on this role, I think, precisely for those reasons. I think David's thinking was, if Portia can do this, anyone can do this. Our goal as an organisation is to unite science and business. It is to unite the human with the environmental. The more small business owners like me can see that they can make a difference within their resources, the better for everyone. And this has been a horrible 6 months for so many of us in travel. And I have to say that in order to get through it, regenerative travel has actually been really useful. Learning about things like a triple bottom line approach and focusing not just on the money I'm no longer making and in fact losing, but on how I can prepare my business to reopen, having made advances around the environment and around social justice, is really what's got me through. It's that mindset of doing business in the right way and knowing that that can be as beneficial for us as businesses as it is for the people and the environment around us. And that's what's made me excited to reopen. And I hope that over the last 2 days, and then with the following 3 sessions, we can inspire hoteliers around the world to feel the same. Now, do know that I will try to keep this session to about 40 minutes so that we have plenty of time for questions and answers at the end, because we are going to be diving into some data and talking about things like metrics and obviously membership criteria. And I know that lots of people will have questions about how they can apply, how they will fit into it. So please make use of the Q&A box, and we'll leave 15 minutes at the end to address those. So this session is aimed at hoteliers primarily, both our existing members and also hoteliers who might be interested in joining regenerative travel. But it's also, I hope, relevant to travellers and to media, and I hope that there are travellers and media on this session, because it's always useful to get insight into the process of how hotels are trying to operate better for both people and planet. We live in a world where really we know very little about so many of the products that we consume. So I think it's helpful to understand and appreciate the other side. If you're travelling or if you're writing about a property, to know what effort have they gone to? What can you expect? When you stay somewhere that doesn't seem to be approaching sustainability or regeneration, what suggestions can you make that are reasonable? When you're writing a review, what deserves to be recognised? So I'll give a little bit of a background as to how Regenerative Travel, the company, started and where it has got to so far, and then also where we'd like to go. We've talked so much over the last couple of days about regenerative tourism being a paradigm shift. And really for Regenerative Travel, the company, this summit has marked a paradigm shift for us. It's the beginning of a new chapter as we expand to accept more properties and as we truly define what membership entails. And this came up on day one, and it's something that I've had in the back of my mind since we began this project. There are so many options out there when it comes to working out how to operate well, how to quantify what you're doing, how to qualify it, and how to tell the world about what you do. Somebody asked on the first day, do we need another system? Now, the answer, of course, is yes, otherwise I wouldn't be here, but it's also no. So how do I make sure that we're not reinventing the wheel, that we're not doubling up on bureaucracy, that we're not just making people jump through hoops for the sake of making them jump through hoops? Addressing the yes, it's necessary side, Regenerative Travel is not a business that exists for the sake of having a business. This isn't the result of an MBA project. It wasn't a job that was created for someone who might just as easily have decided to make toothbrushes or become a lawyer. There isn't an exit strategy for regenerative travel, the company, unless, of course, you count the possibility of obsolescence, because perhaps travel has got its act together and everyone in the industry is doing the right thing all the time anyway. Regenerative Travel, the company, is the creation of a hotelier who was trying to solve an issue that he had that he couldn't find an answer to. Back when no one was using the term regenerative travel, and even fewer people could actually say it, David Leventhal was busy building what then would have been referred to as an eco-resort in Mexico. And his guests at Playa Viva were blown away, not just by the comfort and the caliber of their stay, but the fact that this hotel was operating off-grid, the fact that it was actively involved in conserving turtles, the fact that it was a university for local people eager to learn about world-class hospitality for whom before there was no accessible education. All of these things became experiences for those travelers. They became a part of their holiday. And one client in particular, Pam Page, would say to David, "David, you've ruined travel for me. Where can I go apart from Playa Viva, where I can have a fabulous holiday and feel so good about it?" And David, being a hospitality professional, set about trying to help her find the answer. He went around the world and discovered other hotels that are not like Playa Viva per se, but hotels where the owners and management thought the way he thought. Places where, for the conscious, environmentally or ethically motivated traveler, their vacation could meet their values. David's criteria back then for membership was simple: ethos and aesthetic. Does this hotel do good things? Is it nice to stay here? Does it pass the Pam Page test? Now, David also recognized himself as a prisoner of his own paradise, isolated, as is the nature of so many small eco hotels, and an outlier in the industry that was immediately adjacent to him. So the value of establishing a network of similar properties was obvious. It would be an opportunity to share success stories and to work through common problems together. Many heads, after all, are always better than one. And so came his third criteria: a willingness to share best practice, to view sustainable or regenerative operational methods not as a competitive advantage to be closely guarded as a corporate secret, but as something that needed to be open source and universally applied. And he found about 45 of us, properties of a range of budgets and styles at different stages in their development regarding environmental and social responsibility, but all committed to the basic principle of trying to have an actively positive impact on their immediate surroundings and the communities, and all eager to share their knowledge with each other. So if eco travel and sustainable travel were about maintenance, regenerative travel became about repairing and replenishing. And with over 1,500 people registered at the summit this week, it's clear that David is no longer an outlier. We're all realizing that we need to do more than just staying the same. We receive applications at regenerative travel from hotels all over the world every day of the week. Travelers are contacting us looking for properties in new destinations they want to visit, but where they don't want to compromise their traveling ethic. It seems like travel collectively wants to know how to do things better. Perhaps it's because we know, all of us, that our survival as an industry, as a species, as a planet depends on it. So it's time for regenerative travel, both as a concept and us as a company, to grow. It's time to find more properties in more places, to inspire other properties. It's time to connect with more travelers and to play a role in doing the right thing mainstream, to change the way we talk about travel and the way we talk about luxury. What we really want is to make environmental and social responsibility as ubiquitous to hospitality as clean sheets, good service, and decent food. So to do that, we needed to find a way for hotels to objectively take and pass the Pam Page test. But how to do it without reinventing the wheel? We've talked about how there are so many existing measures and systems in place. And in fact, that is where we started. You'll see some of them here: the United Nations Sustainability Development Goals, B Corporation, the 4 pillars of sustainability, organization like the Long Run's 4 Cs, and my favorite of all, donut economics. And as a side, I cannot recommend getting stuck into donut economics or B Corp literature enough. If you've ever been totally perplexed by the concept of infinite exponential growth and wondered that it was viable or even natural, hint, it's not, or if you're currently in a state of depression because you've just watched The Social Dilemma, then start reading these and prepare to feel hope blossom once again. Now, what we see with these influences is that they're not specifically related to travel, but what they all have in common is the dual focus on both planet and people. I think it was Duke Phillips on the first day of the summit who said it. It starts with people. Anyone running a small hotel who has tried can tell you how much harder it is to implement a simple recycling program if all of their staff is not engaged. And anyone who has lived with economic uncertainty, which may be everyone on this session right now, anyone who has lived with fear for their personal safety or lack of access to basic human needs will know just how far down the list recycling falls when you're working out how to survive today. So our first addition to David's original criteria of ethos, aesthetic, and sharing best practices was that we would place an equal weight on people as we do on planet. I think we covered it yesterday in the amazing media panel. For a long time, the word sustainable, eco, green, it's associated with the environment. Travelers often have transparency regarding a hotel's green credentials, but with the exception of a brave and wonderful few, and I will shout out to Fogo Island Inn, we don't always see the same level of transparency when it comes to people. And I mean all the people, not just the marketable people who fit in with the client's cultural interests. And we don't see the same transparency when it comes to economic distribution. So if we have ethos, aesthetic, sharing best practice, we're now adding a fourth element to becoming a regenerative property. And that is you have to be as committed to the human as you do to the environment and vice versa. The second addition we made to David's original criteria, and this is where half of the people on this call will probably breathe a huge sigh of relief, and the other half might roll their eyes in exasperation, was that we would not base membership on benchmarking or quantifiable standards. To rigorous environmentalists and social justice warriors, that may sound counterintuitive, even damaging. Are we going to let anyone who feels like it just stick a regenerative logo on their website? No. But are we going to say that a property can't get on board because they aren't stewards of 10,000 acres of rainforest, or because they're still on the grid? We're not going to do that either. Because what happens when we set a fixed standard? Let's say to be an RT property, you must divert 70% of your waste from landfill. You rush to achieve that, you get your badge of honor on the website. Where is the incentive to get to 100%? If sustainability is about staying the same, and regeneration is about constant improvement, then you've got to get to 100. And then you've got to go beyond. You're zero waste. Okay, how can you generate value from that process? And here I will mention Suniva Fushi, who have just been incredible with their glassworking programs, creating a circular economy, providing more employment opportunities. So at Regenerative Travel, the company, we're not interested in letting you stop where you are. We're interested in helping you to go further. So let's say you share our ethos. You've got an amazing aesthetic and you're somewhere that people want to stay. You're generous with your knowledge. You approach people and planet with equal dedication. And now this final element, you know that you haven't finished. It sounds good. You are essentially a regenerative property. But how do you prove it? And this is where, sorry, benchmarking and data do come in. To know that we're improving, we have to be measuring what we're doing. And to be credible, Regenerative Travel as an organisation has got to hold its members to the task of evidencing their claims. Now, data has, I think in the UK, what we would call the Marmite effect. When you mention data collection, people's eyes either light up or they run away and hide. We ran a poll recently with our existing members and found that even some of the most committed properties don't collect data. And there is a huge amount of variation among those that do. And the two main fear factors when we asked those who didn't, why not, always came down to two things: resource and judgment. Shame, unfortunately, has taken on too much prominence in conversations around sustainability. And so many are understandably reluctant to collect and share their data for fear that it won't be good enough and they'll be criticised publicly. Maybe they use too much electricity, or maybe their team isn't diverse enough. Well, a core part of the philosophy at Regenerative Travel is to take where you are as a starting point and focus on getting better. The only bad data from our point of view is scarce data. So something that I really want to emphasize today when we start to dive into the metrics we'll be using for evidence and commitment to benchmarking is that there are no wrong results. If you see something and you think, I don't think we'd be very strong in that area, that doesn't mean you can't qualify. It just means it's an area that maybe you need to think about. If you're asking yourself how you can do better, then you're doing the right thing. And my job, our job at Regenerative Travel is not to shut you out or criticize you, but it's to help you move forward. And as someone who has been terrified of data collection myself, less from the fear point of view, but more from what I consider the monumental task of collecting it, I'm probably not best placed to reassure you. So I will ask our new technical partner, Eric Ricaurte from Greenview Portal, to come online now and to share some of his insights into data. Greenview has been in the business, I think, for 10 years. They work with so many global organizations and big hotel brands. And Eric really is an expert in not just the collecting of data, but also the analysis of it and benchmarking. And I think, Eric, you can quite possibly begin to reassure us about how we can find as small hoteliers that balance between data rigor and collecting the right information, but not being overwhelmed. And I really hope that Eric is here.
Hello.
Morning, Eric, or afternoon, I should say, actually, in Singapore.
I actually should say buenas noches because it's 8:16 p.m., but happy to be on and happy to be here. All right, very good. So first up, thank you, everyone. And can you see me or is it just hearing me right now?
I can't see you, and I am not sure what everybody else thinks, but I can hear your dulcet tones and you sound lovely.
Oh, there we go. I can see. Okay, thank you. All right. Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Eric Ricaurte with Greenview, and thank you, Portia. This has been a fantastic opportunity, and happy to be here and participate. I don't want to take up too much time, but just a couple of thoughts to start to reiterate what you said is, for those who have been in the sustainable tourism game since the 80s and 90s, the OGs in this game, back then it was a much different place because it was not about mainstreaming. Let's be honest, everybody had kind of a self-identity of I am that alternative person in the ecotourism and sustainable tourism. But now it's different and it's about mainstreaming. And so there's been this need to sort of bridge the gap between those who really know a lot because they've been in this for 10, 20 years, and those who are just getting started now. And that's what we have tried to do, is to catalyze sustainability across the industry and to give that platform in order to allow those who are just starting, those who are keeping up, or those who want to keep being leaders to always continuously improve. And we do that in a number of ways. But most important is we work behind the scenes. So we are, even though we work with dozens of hotel companies, we're not your brand. We're the ones who help you look good. And our platforms are all meant to help the hotels and the companies move forward in their own journey and tell their own story. And we give the tools, but we're not taking credit. That's one thing. The second is what we found as we started to really get into the pieces of data collection, data analysis, is exactly what Portia said. There is this hesitation because there is that historical dichotomy of those who really are in this and have been collecting data, you said it, the Sunebufushis, who are way on the other end because they've been doing this for so long. And then you have those who are just starting. And what we found in the world of sustainable tourism and hotel industry is you didn't necessarily have the medium and you didn't have that ground. So imagine that we talk about it, it's like running a race, getting in shape. You're against your own performance metrics, you're against your own data, but you have to measure and you have to improve over time. Imagine you say, yes, I want to get in shape. And then in order to get in shape, the only thing you could do is join a gym where everybody's a triathlete, where everybody's in shape. They've got the tools, they've got they've got all the gear, they've got the uniforms, they've got sponsorship. And you're like, I just want to lose a few pounds. I just want to get in the game. And so what we found is there is that gap, and the tools we provide and our approach on this is to enable those at any stage, like I said, get started. Don't worry, we've got you. Start out slow. Get these basic metrics, get these things going, and you'll immediately start to see the results. The anecdotes will come everywhere. The best one I still hark back to all the time is a company we worked with who was collecting water data for the property, and they noticed a big spike in water from 1 month to the next, and they ended up diagnosing and finding out there was a leak in the pipe from the pool. that nobody knew about, nobody found, it wasn't visible, wasn't there, and they would only catch that because they actually had 2 months of data collected against one another. And so there's so much to be said. It's so basic yet so valuable, and that's where I think where the point is to start, because there's so many benefits from getting started with it. And now I'm happy to be here in this presentation and geek out on all the data and the metrics and the numbers with you, Portia. So take it away and feel free to call me as needed.
Brilliant. Well, thank you so much for that. And I'm pleased that at least one person here is excited about geeking out. And probably everybody reassured that it's not going to be me who's responsible for collecting data and analyzing it. But I think now it's time to dive in, as you say, and to begin to look at what metrics we are going to be studying when we work with our member properties. So I talked about how people and planet were really the 2 areas that we wanted to focus on. And I think on the planet side, a lot of people who are attending this and a lot of hotels that have been working with sustainability and regeneration will be very aware that waste, water, and energy are the big 3. And then on the people side, it's maybe coincidence, but this summer I think has been such a step forward for talking about people and social justice and the way we interact with each other. And so we have divided that into inclusion, so that covers diversity and social justice, education, which is making sure that every single one of our stakeholders is involved in the conversation and is well taken care of. And then distribution, which is always the tricky one. Money is a dirty word, but we can't operate in business if we aren't prepared to talk about wealth and how we distribute it. So to dive in, we'll start with the planetary elements. So looking at waste, water, and energy. And I think, Eric, when we spoke the first time, I was concerned about how, as an organization, we would be able to help a small hotel with maybe 5 bedrooms in a rural area to compare themselves to a 400-bed hotel in maybe central London, if they're both producing waste and one is 10 tons a year and one is 1,000 tons a year. How do we provide context? And you explained to me the concept of intensity, which I think is a really nice way of looking at it and helps those of us who aren't mathematical to kind of understand.
Yes, I mean, intensity, and this is of course intense, is how do you compare? What is a fair comparison? And we will dive into that. We've got that. We've been looking at this for 10 years. And what we feel is that there's the intensity, which you can break down and say, okay, well, energy per square meter, right? So that the bigger you are, you're still on intensity. You can do it by rooms. There's plenty of ways that we do that and that are embedded into here. But the point is we provide first the scale. So you want to know how much you weigh, you have to step on a scale, and you're going to have to know where on the general scale you fit. Am I 50 kg? Am I 100? Am I 150? And then do I rationalize that? Well, how tall I am? How, do I have a bigger bone structure? All of those kind of things you have to then interpret and understand, but you need the base scale and you need some type of comparison. And so that's what we work to make sure is that by doing this, you can, one, compare your weight over time. And then second, you'll have that where you fit on the scale, and then the ability to rationalize, well, am I fitting correctly, or do I, because everybody can always improve a little bit, but you have the ability to measure and then see where you can improve on. That's the base and the premise of these metrics, and making sure that, yes, we need to know our total impact as well. We need to know exactly what is my aggregate impact, because we have one finite planet with a finite limit, but the intensity piece also is going to be important going through with this as well.
And I think it's worth saying here, Eric, that these are just 12 planetary metrics that we've selected. Greenview as a portal, I think, has in the hundreds. Members will be able to access the entire Greenview portal. What would you say to a property that wanted to record more about the pressure that they feel because they feel like we should be recording everything, or maybe they can't, they're going to struggle to make the 12? How do we manage that? Like, how can we not lose ourselves in trying to collect all the data that there is?
Yep, I think first is the steps. This is a journey, this is an improvement. So start measuring. When we work with hotel companies on their annual inventory, so they've got 10, 20, 100, 2,000 properties, the first year is always the heaviest lift, figuring out the data, getting it entered, and you're going to spend a couple of years actually just on getting the data entered in correctly and managing it correctly. And then you can start to see the improvement over time. So one, Start slow, baby steps. Do this at your own pace. As Portia mentioned, the important thing is that these are the common ones you should be looking at, because I feel that if you measure these, you really look at them and you strive to improve them over time, then you can be regenerative. The second then is it is a matter of location and context. Some metrics will be much more important to you. In addition to these, some will be much more important based on your location. Water scarcity might be an issue. Waste management might be an issue. Energy might be an issue for how it's generated and how it's then distributed. So you can then go in and do a deeper dive based on what are some of the more important factors based on your location, your community, and your hotel type.
And I think that's actually a really crucial aspect for us to consider. We're so accustomed to seeing rural hotels, island hotels, hotels in areas of extreme natural beauty be much more engaged with the sustainability or the regenerative concept. And when we were selecting these metrics, we really had in our minds hotels that are based in urban centers, because it's so easy to kind of dismiss. And I actually say it's because I have a small hotel on an island, and I also have a small hotel in a city center. And for years, I've just been operating on the premise that my small hotel in the city centre can never really be sustainable or regenerative because it's in a city, which of course doesn't make any sense. Of course, we can do the right thing. Of course, we can look at our energy sources. We can look at the way we use water. We can look at the way that we treat people. And so what we've done by selecting these kind of baseline data is we've tried to make them as inclusive as possible, so that no property in any geographical location or in any context is excluded or is faced with a bunch of metrics that just don't apply to them. So I think moving, and we don't worry if you haven't noted all of these down, for existing members, you will get an information pack about your continued membership. And for members who, or prospective members who are interested in joining, this information will be available online. So don't panic, we're not going to go through them all one by one because we would be here for the full 3 hours of today. But moving on to, and this is my own sort of personal passion area, the social data points. And I really wanted to ask you, Eric, because you have so much experience here. Have you seen in the last year, the last 6 months, a shift in your clients and hotels around the world beginning to want to measure social data?
Definitely, definitely. And I think we all know why, but the context is important. Why measure and why manage this, and then why communicate it externally? There's definitely more interest all around, from the customer side, from regulatory side, and from investor side as well. And so we've seen such a huge shift. Two big reasons. First, obviously, there has been a global awakening to the need to solve gaps of racial inequality. And we're seeing this, the amount of diversity and inclusion committees being created at a company level right now are just unprecedented. So getting to the heart of the issue of racial and inequality, diversity, that's one, and that's coming to the forefront. The second is the real interesting one that we saw with COVID-19 also is the analysis that's always done. Do sustainable companies outperform non-sustainable companies? We're diving much more into that now. And one of the most interesting things are the analysis of how are you treating your employees and your people and communities during COVID? And there's an entity called It's Just Capital, and they do ESG analysis on different companies, and they tracked and said, is there a outperformance or better performance of companies that are treating their employees better in COVID-19 than those who are not? And then they're working with those numbers. So those are two of the main ones we've seen this year in the trend. In addition to just the other thing is people realize the traveler cares more, and customers in general care more, and people care about people, and people care about content, and they care about tangible things, and the social aspects are always so much more tangible on a day-to-day, especially since you're going to a destination and getting experiences.
And it's so true. I'm kind of nodding my head the whole way through. And I think for anyone, and I doubt that there are people who are skeptics in this summit, because I suspect that it's already properties and travelers and writers who have an interest in regenerative travel listening. But so if anyone was skeptical and thinking, I'm not sure if this is a move that I'm ready for, what you're saying essentially is, doesn't matter if you're ready or not, this is actually good for your business. If you treat people well, if you are fair and just, if you have diversity in the way that you, for example, communicate with customers, you appeal to a wider market, if you treat your staff properly and you have a lower turnover, this is all good business. So if you are still only thinking about your financial bottom line, this is good for your financial bottom line as well. Essentially, doing the right thing will make you more money.
Definitely. And I think, and just to follow up on that is when we talk about metrics, everybody and all of the metric people on the call who love to get into the data, we tend to just get really down into the focus of the metrics. What we found over the past decade in the social is comparing social is even more complicated, which is straightforward. But again, if you're not looking at this, if you're not actually measuring this and you're looking at these numbers over time, then you're not really having the context within it. And so having that context is important here, even though these are not always going to be as comparable across. It's at least the importance of knowing that, yes, we are taking a look at these and we're conscious of them. And now we look at things like underrepresented groups, things about training, things about community engagement, those kind of things. Those are going to be very important, even though the metric itself is not going to be that level of comparison as when you talk about energy or water, you know, per occupied room, that kind of thing.
Okay, so we're just going to have to learn to kind of understand our data in a different way, but still very exciting to collect it. And then I think, you know, the next kind of really one is economic metric collection. Of course, for companies which are not publicly trading, there tends to be, you know, a quite jealously guarded privacy about money. Very few operators in the travel industry are operating like Fogo Island Inn with their amazing economic nutrition labeling. Do you see more and more companies and hotels on the Greenview portal tracking revenue or sharing economic data or interested in benchmarking against these kinds of elements? And you know, what's your opinion on really the kind of more transparent messaging behind how you're distributing the wealth that you're handling, receiving, and generating through your business?
Yeah, so this is a common one in publicly traded companies and public disclosure, where the wage ratios, where economic benefit and contributions are always there, and they're looked at. And now putting this into a property level is actually very interesting for the same reasons I mentioned before. So we're seeing some of this. I think the other aspect, just going back into data and metrics, is we like to think of, when we get into data, something that's very complex but structured. And sustainability, I say, is actually very simple, but it's fluid. It's always changing. It's a moving target, and there's always an evolution of information because we're on this journey. And so this is one direction that some companies are going in right now, and this is one direction that we're seeing a lot more because of this general idea of where does it come from? Where does it go? Right. That's what plastic did for the for the planet. Was people started to think, oh yeah, where did this come from and where is it going? And that mentality keeps going, and that actually now goes into the economic side of, well, where's the money coming from and where is it going? I mean, the tourism leakage piece has been, that's been a pillar of this discipline for decades. But think about it on a property side and getting managers to think about it. Where did it come from? Where's it going? Where's the money come from? Where's it going? Who's benefiting? That kind of thing is this part of this next evolution.
And I think we've actually, I know we do have Q&A at the end, but we did just get a question come up, which I think specifically relates to what we're talking about right now. So asking to describe the process and methodology behind how we came up with these standards. Who developed them? A board of experts, people in tourism communities. So the answer is all of the above. These are a series of criteria that have really been in the making since the founding of Regenerative Travel. So we could say we started with David Leventhal, our founder, and we set up a committee over the summer during the COVID closure, because for the first time, all of these hoteliers suddenly had the time on their hands to engage in this conversation. And it has been an iterative process, which is by no means finished. So we started looking at it from a hotelier's point of view, and we then introduced Greenview into the process. And as we publish them today, we expect to get a lot more feedback from other stakeholders in the industry, and also obviously experts and specialists in sustainability and regeneration. So the idea is we all put them together, but also that this is never going to be a concrete set of metrics. What you see on the screen today may be adjusted in 2 weeks' time. It may be adjusted in 2 years' time, because the whole concept of generation is that it is not a fixed point. And I think, Eric, you can say how much you've seen in the last 10 years, data collection and metrics just evolve, shift, move as they respond to what's happening in the world around us, right?
Definitely. I mean, this is, it's been something that's constantly evolving, and it's going to keep evolving. And it's a great question. And that's one of the difficulties about sustainability. In the corporate world, we love the term materiality. And so there was the big materiality piece of let's find out what are the key topics to your business. And so then you have to go engage with stakeholders. And it's kind of curious how, depending on the stakeholder you engage, the thing that's their gig is what they care about. So if you ask a water conservation organization, what's the most important thing for a hotel industry? They're going to say it's water. If you ask a labor organization, they're going to say labor. And so it is a matter of constantly evolving it, getting a lot of input. Even now, we have one from shout out to Willy Legrand from Germany, talking about mental well-being of hospitality workers. Definitely important, definitely interesting, but putting things into a rubric that is something that, again, for the point of that, at a minimum, we think you should be looking at this. At a minimum, you should be looking at this, and this will be something that is then used in the process for regenerative travel. Throughout the cycle. That's another lens that this needs to be looked at, because it's one thing to say, yes, I'm a policymaker and I want to make sure that these are the criteria, or I'm setting a standard on building and I have to do it this way. The difference here is, what is your motive for setting the metrics and what are you trying to accomplish in the first place? So I would say, think about that first, is what is the motive for setting these, and then the metrics flow a little bit differently.
Brilliant. And there are more and more questions coming through, but I think I will leave those to the end, otherwise I'm going to disappear down the rabbit hole. So I think if we've covered so far, and to the person who's just asked, have we covered fees? No, we haven't. We always save that till the end. So we know where Regenerative Travel as a company came from, and we are beginning to understand how a hotel might join. And then once they're a member, what they're going to be expected to do. So the next thing is, well, how do you join? And Eric, don't go away, because I'm going to definitely throw a lot of these questions at you, but you can chill out for the next 5 minutes as we just go through some of the kind of admin side of it. So the application journey is one that begins with honesty. And this is actually always a really tricky one. When you speak to hoteliers, you always have one side that say it has to be rigorously audited and it has to be you can't trust people. People are always inclined to do the wrong thing. And then you'll have the other side that says, we're operating in regeneration, which is all about positivity and it's about community, and we're grown-ups. And so we have taken on board both of those concepts, both of those ways of thinking. We begin with honesty. So we begin with a self-assessment. And we will ask anybody or any property that is considering joining regenerative travel to ask a series of questions. And those questions relate to the ethic, the way that you manage your business ethically, how thoughtful you are, whether or not you have things like supply chain procedures in place, how you treat your staff, are they all on proper contracts? What about seasonal staff? Do they get social security benefits? We will obviously have a minimum environmental level. So for example, a property applying to join regenerative travel should, as a minimum, not be using single-use plastics, because that's something easy that any property can do. And this self-assessment isn't audited. This is something that we will ask members or potential members to consider themselves. It will be posted on a page on our website. There are 7 sections, and each section contains kind of an aspirational goal, which is where we want all of our members to be, and then a minimum standard. And those minimum standards are things like contracts, single-use plastic, ethical treatment of animals, being harmonious to the place that you're in, respectful of the local culture. They are probably things that 90% of those of you who are listening to this session are already doing, but it is still worth just sitting down and asking the question before you make the membership application. And the second part of the application process is over to us. So we hope that people will filter themselves out. If they don't, we will still filter you. And the regenerative travel assessment really falls into 2 sections in the beginning. So this is where we do an online audit, and we will be looking at your social media channels, your website, blogs, any marketing information that you are putting out there, your PR results if you're covered in magazines, and anything that the owners and management team are perhaps contributing to. So if they are speakers at Matter or Pure, or if they're involved in travel organizations. And we will also look at review sites, so TripAdvisor, Booking.com. We want to know, really, when we do this online audit, are you as a business communicating your commitment to regeneration? Is it obvious to stakeholders? Does a person booking at your hotel know that you are committed to social justice and environmental responsibility. Because if you are applying to become a regenerative resort and you can't see any evidence of that on your Instagram or on your website, and if in reading the reviews no one is talking about it, then we are going to question whether or not you have really succeeded in perhaps taking what's up here in the owner's head and putting that across the organization and its marketing. So that's the first side, which is an online audit. And then the second element of the regenerative travel assessment is, of course, an interview. And at this stage, we still do all the interviews ourselves. So you would most probably end up speaking to David Leventhal, our founder. We have 45 members currently, and over the next year, we will just be taking on another 100. So this is not a plan to grow exponentially and quickly. And we are allowing ourselves 3 months between now and the end of the year to begin that process. So during an interview, which would be with an owner or with senior management, and one of our baseline criteria is that unless there is an amazing reason to bend the rules, regenerative travel is a collection that is for properties where the owner or significant shareholder is actively involved in the business. If they aren't, then we will need to see evidence that the employees are fully empowered to make meaningful management decisions. And so in that interview, that essentially is the Pam page test. That is David or me or Amanda finding out if your owner or management values are really in line with the ethos of regenerative resorts. And it's a chance to talk about, for example, if you're a member of a benefit, if you are a B Corp, or if you're a member of an organization such as the Long Run, or if you have an amazing NGO that's a part of your hotel, it's a chance to shine, to talk about all of those things that might not come up in the metrics and may not be on your website, and a chance to demonstrate your commitment to the concept of regeneration and sustainable travel. And then, so if all goes well and you self-assess, you meet the criteria, your online presence tells the same story, and you sit in an interview with us and totally win us over, then you become what we are referring to as an aspiring regenerative travel property. So as an aspiring property, you then begin a process of converting to a committed property. And there are two ways to convert. The first way, and I've mentioned this, if you are a B Corp or if you are a Long Run, or if you are perhaps a Nat Geo Lodge, those are not guarantees. There is no guaranteed shortcuts. But of course, all of those will be taken into account. So if, for example, you produce a sustainability report, if you are already benchmarking and you are already collecting data, if you are a member of an organization, if you are eco-credited, all of that data, we will take it on and we will bear it in mind. But we have come across in the past properties which have incredible environmental credentials. They are off-grid, they have virtually no wastewater, they are practically carbon neutral or even carbon negative, but they don't perhaps have such strong social and human standards. And so it isn't necessarily that those elements will guarantee you entry, but it could be a shortcut. And then if you are not, don't panic. You will then get access to Greenview, to the portal, and that comes at no cost while you are an aspiring member. And you will begin to log your data. And that is a 6-month process. We are not expecting to see an enormous change. This is not like, well, when you start, you'll be at X, and then after 6 months, you'll be at Y, and if you're not, you don't get in. What we're looking to see with this is commitment to data collection. So we want to see that every month you are logging the minimum data points required. We want to see that your team is set up so that they're able to do it, and that you are ready, in fact, to take on that longer term commitment of becoming a fully regenerative property. So if that goes well, 6 months in, or perhaps you're a B Corp and you were able to evidence all of the criteria that we're requesting, you become a committed regenerative travel property. And this is where I think everybody wants to know is, how much does it cost? And trust me, as a hotel that has been closed for the last 6 months, I am very aware of how much budget everybody has, and that it is extremely close to zero. One of the first things to say is that we do not want to lock any good property out for economic reasons. So we have designed the fee structure in order to enable any property to join. And it's something that I mentioned briefly, it is so important to us that properties on the lower economic value of the spectrum still have an opportunity. You know, David, when he started this, said, I want it to be places where I would go on holiday. And now he wants to also include places where his kids might be going on holiday. So there is no reason why a youth hostel could not become a regenerative property. And so for committed members, we will have a fee structure which is based on the number of rooms you have and the average price point of your rack rates. And that really starts at about, we're talking about a very small property with maybe 8 bedrooms that's charging less than $200 a night. You're looking at a contribution of around $600 a year or $50 a month. The good news is while you're an aspiring property, there's nothing to pay. And what we will do there, because Regenerative Travel is also offers a booking service for customers, we would ask for a contribution through commissions just to cover the running costs and to cover your access to the Greenview portal. Now, if you're committed but there still isn't budget, one of the questions we do have to ask is why, because being a financially viable business is a big part of being sustainable and regenerative. But we will be offering scholarships. So if there are properties whose owners or management teams can act as mentors to other aspiring properties, perhaps running seminars, sharing best practice in an even more interactive way than a standard member, ambassadors who are really out there flying the flag for regenerative travel and having a huge impact on the number of travelers who are involved, on the number of press who are writing pieces about it. And then this concept, which I cannot translate from Colombia, which is Canhe, which is basically, if you have something that you can give to the Regenerative Travel organization, if you are, for example, multilingual and can help us to get all of our assets into Spanish and French and Mandarin, and you want to do that for us in exchange for having a membership, as well as obviously meeting all the criteria, then that is possible. This is an organization which is not setting about just making the founder a millionaire. This is an organization that is trying to change the way that our industry is operating, and so we do want it to be accessible to everybody. So you will find out precisely what your fee would be once a committed member, once you've made the application and passed the aspirational process. And as I say, it would be based on your number of rooms and your rack rate, and we have tried to make it as affordable as possible for everybody. And I think on our as we go to the question and answer, I will just leave you with our pledge, which is something that was mentioned yesterday in the media panel. I think it was Aaron Miller who said, you know, I just feel like as a community, we need a way of saying what we're committed to when it comes to sustainability and regeneration. And so this is the Regenerative Pledge, which we will be asking all of our existing members to make as they become committed members. And it's something that we would ask anyone considering becoming a regenerative resort to bear in mind, to read, to consider, to think about, and to try to incorporate into their business operation. And without further ado, I will, because we have 10 minutes left, move to questions and answers. And Eric, if you've seen one that you really want to go for, then jump in while I organize myself. Lisa, where will the metrics and criteria be published and shared after the summit to all existing members by email next week? And then in the first week of October, we will be opening applications and all of this information will be online. Jeff notes, I'm exploring developing an eco-resort, 1,400 hectares in the remote, lush Brazilian Amazon rainforest, lucky you, that has numerous spectacular waterfalls and caves throughout the property. My priority is hang on, I'm sorry, I'm lost with this. My priority is to work and partner with an established, proven hotel resort development management company. Any such partner suggestions would be appreciated. Jeff, I'm not sure that I can answer that, but hopefully somebody on the panel or on the session will reach out to you later. I don't know if you want to just publish your email address in the Q&A there. Elizabeth, is occupancy taken into account for the fee structure? It is not, because that just becomes very complex. And we also would hope that regenerative resorts, as part of their business models, have a sufficient occupancy to pay their fees. But as I say, post-COVID, obviously all of us have very low occupancy. So we are giving everybody a 6-month window to be able to get their occupancy back up. Eric, do you have anything that you would like to add? I don't know if I can. No, I think only.
There we go.
Oh, there he is.
Okay, great. Yeah, just to the question on the benchmark data and the publishing of data and stats. So where do we get our data and where do we work with from? I directed the answer, one, on the benchmarking of energy, water, and carbon. We manage the Cornell Sustainability CHSB, Cornell Hotel Sustainable Benchmarking Index. So we get data from 18,000 hotels, and then we benchmark them by market and by segment. That gives us then a publicly available range by market and segment, because the most amazing thing we see in the data is there is a wide range. Even if you have urban hotels, similar asset class, similar amenities, similar size, the range of performance actually is pretty wide. And that's what we love, because by showing that, we can show that there's always an opportunity to improve. And so by making that data transparent, then that is going to be available for everybody to really understand that scale, where are you at. So we manage that, but that's freely available. That's on behalf of the 24 companies that participate and submit data to us to make that available for the industry. That over the last 10 years of work has given us the knowledge for every single type of scenario that you would have in a hotel. Well, what about this energy side? I've got kerosene, I've got wood chips, I've got all these kind of different things on the energy side, on the water side. So we've been able to really understand and come up with a system that can help measure and track that will be applicable to any hotel. And then when we can, we provide benchmarks more relevant to the hotel. That's on the quantitative. Then on the qualitative side, for the best practices, because what we think are more important are what are you actually doing to get to the better performance on the quantitative. And so we have a library in the portal, and we have a benchmarking thing we do called the Green Lodge and Trends Report, where we take data and people submit, and then we see what percentage of the hotel world, in the industry, in the market, in the country, are doing these things. What percent have variable frequency drives in their kitchen hood fans? What percent have linen towel reuse? That's the power of data, and that's what I think this is the power of this piece, is that, and we publish those, and then we give benchmarking reports back, because the more you see and you get in that psyche, that's the way we benchmark. That's the way we exist in the industry. We see, okay, what are the rates of my neighbor? What's their occupancy? How's their breakfast? How's their Wi-Fi? How's their gym? We need to put that same mentality of how their variable frequency drives. I know how's their automation and their heating and cooling, right? How are they treating their staff? What are they doing? We enable that, and so making that publicly available on a general side, and then having the business intelligence on the property by property side helps you sort of move along. So you can look on our website; those are freely available: Green Lodge and Trends Report and the CHB Index to download the data. And the beauty of this is the more we get and the more we work. And now in the last 2 years, we've seen such an increase in so many unique types of properties that even though every property is unique, the ability to really have more and more intelligence of remote properties, unique properties, will help build this over time and catalyze.
Thank you very much. To answer Alessandra, how is what Regenerative Travel doing different from the long run? I think the key here is that the long run, which is an amazing organization, is heavily focused on conservation. So if you, for example, are an urban hotel, then you could not qualify for membership at long run because you are not involved in land conservation. I think that it's possible for both organizations to sit quite comfortably alongside each other. The long run is also extremely rigorous. It's extremely scientifically led. And I think Regenerative Travel is a bit more inclusive, on the premise that we are trying to get as many small businesses involved as possible, and on a really wide level of diversity in terms of types of business. And I hope that answers your question. So Willie, on the mental health for staff, I would say tune in the third panel today, because Hamanasi Resort, which is an amazing property, has done just wonderful things with their staff well-being, mental health and physical, and it is well worth listening to Dana speak and asking her a couple of questions in that panel. So I hope that you'll be able to join and to connect with her. Hannah, the most common barriers when a hotel is beginning their sustainability journey, really it's fear. Fear of doing the wrong thing and thinking that if they can't get it all, then they can't be sustainable or regenerative. So, oh my God, we could never put solar panels in, we haven't got the resource, so we can't do it. And I think the answer to that is something that someone told me at the beginning of my journey, which is 1% better today is still better. And thousands of small businesses across the world being 1% better today is even better than just 1 or 2 businesses being 100% better. So if you are able to kind of put your nerves to one side, and start with something that is manageable, which could be as simple as, you know, taking straws out of your drinks, or beginning to separate your dry cardboard, you will find that there is a kind of an addiction that comes from having done one small right thing. And it's just taking each day one step at a time. And have we collected data from existing properties to analyze impact on their revenue from being a part of your program? Fabulous question. No, we have not, but it is certainly a question that we can ask existing properties, and we would very happily, I suspect, share on our website, and probably a question that we should ask, and a question that I would ask any business owner to constantly evaluate. Basically, are the investments that they're making worth it? But I would say, are they worth it using that triple bottom line approach? Are they worth it financially? Are they worth it socially? And are they worth it environmentally? Do we work with consultants such as interior designers and architects focused on environmentally conscious building renovation and sourcing practices for new hotels or hotels interested in renovating older properties? We as an organization do not, but one of the great things about the community is that hotels who are members in our convenings will share information, they will share contacts with each other. And so becoming a member can be a really good way of not officially having access to architects and designers, but being able to connect with other hotel owners who will be able to put you in touch with someone perhaps in your region. Karen McBride, do you have more data from certain parts of the world versus others? At the moment, no, but I think Eric can definitely say that he has data from all over the world.
We do, but it is skewed toward North America and Asia. Just because that's where the focus is, and that's where the aggregation of data has been the easiest for us through brands and through intermediaries. But as we've seen in the wave of interest in the last year, we're going to get a lot more data coming in this year as more and more people come to the table, more and more realize they need to measure, and we provide the platform that hopefully can enable that most effectively.
Thank you. And we've got 2 more here, and I've got 1 minute left. So Rory, have we been able to work with OTAs to do a better job of showcasing that properties are committed with the environment and communities? Now, I'm actually going to take off my regenerative travel hat here, and I'm going to put on my hotelier hat and say, not enough. And I am so frustrated with OTAs on every level of operation. And I would encourage OTAs to engage with us as small businesses, because I think so often there is an element of perhaps greenwashing or trying to send you down their own certification. And I think it would be fantastic if our community could use our plurality to begin to influence OTAs in the way that they do interact, especially with the smaller properties. And finally, Elizabeth, do you evaluate race, age, gender, nationality of lodge clients as part of the assessment? Yes, we will be taking into account the client representation. There is an element of data there, and so we have to be very careful about the data we're collecting on our clients, and they have to opt into us storing that data. So it will be a part of our criteria. And in Greenview, I think, Eric, you can answer this, is there a way to measure that data for clients?
Yep, for clients, for the lodges, yes. So there's a way to put all the those metrics on diversity on basically employee stats. We have that available in a template to use, and those are the kind of things that we're constantly working to upgrade now that we're seeing a lot more interest to do this across the board. And there's a lot more sort of common frameworks and common metrics people are looking at. So as part of the constant involvement of this, that's one of the big focuses for 2020 and 2021.
Brilliant. Well, Eric, thank you so much for your time. Thank you, everybody, for your questions. Our LinkedIn addresses are coming up on the next slide, and I will see those of you who are joining the next travel on social diversity and social inclusion relating to regenerative travel and the environment in 1.5 minutes. So thank you again, and see you very shortly.
Thank you, everyone.
So welcome back, everybody, after possibly the shortest break in the history of conferences. I'm delighted now to hand over center stage to the amazing Shivani Ashoka, journalist and diversity advocate. Shivani is a travel writer. She has worked with Condé Nast Traveler, the Sunday Times, and more, with a special interest in global social impact, sustainability, and racial diversity. She's the co-founder of a fortnightly newsletter called Unpacking Media Bias, which helps media tackle unconscious bias in all forms of the press. And Shivani will be leading us in the next hour as we discuss how regeneration, environmental, and social equality are connected. So Shivani, over to you.
Hi, thanks, Portia. I was going to do a quick introduction myself, but I don't need to now because you've done it perfectly. So thanks very much. I am really thrilled to be moderating this today. It's a discussion that's really important to me, particularly, I write a lot about social impact and racial diversity, and for me this conversation is in a kind of more public sphere. It's kind of long overdue. So I'm really thrilled to have these three brilliant women speaking today, and I'm sure you're going to learn a huge amount from their insights. I'll just introduce them to you quickly. What we're going to talk about is how regeneration, environmental and social equality are all connected. That's basically anything from how hotels can really embrace diversity and inclusion, what they can be doing from management level right down to the ground, and also really unpick where to start for people who are nervous about taking the first step towards a more diverse workforce and a more diverse output. So let me just introduce you properly to these ladies now. We have Teresa Baker, who is the founder of the Outdoor CEO Diversity Pledge. Through the pledge, Teresa works to create relationships with outdoor brands, retailers, and conservation organizations, with the hope of fostering a more diverse experience for underrepresented communities in outdoor spaces. She was recently awarded the Outdoor Retailer Show Inspiration Award for her work around matters of diversity and inclusion. Hi, Teresa. We have Harsha Lakwa, who is the founder of Syra Hospitality. From her career with Six Senses, Fullerton Hotel, and Aman Resorts across Asia, Harsha brings a global eye for education and hospitality to her work around the world. Syra partners with luxury hotels, creating meaningful pop-up schools to educate and empower local communities for employment in hospitality, offering hotels community diplomacy, high retention, and local talent. For Portia, I'm sure none of you need an introduction if you have just listened to the new standard set out by Regenerative Travel, but in case you have just logged on, Portia is the owner of Blue Apple Beach House, the co-founder of the Green Apple Foundation, and standard bearer for Regenerative Travel. She is British Trinidadian by birth and is currently an immigrant hotelier operating in Northern Colombia, where since 2015, she has co-founded 2 boutique hotels, 3 beach clubs, a bar, and a non-profit foundation. She also works with Regenerative Travel to define and maintain membership standards. When do you guys sleep? I mean, honestly, like, so many brilliant things. No, listen, we know the travel industry is lagging in terms of diversity and inclusivity, whether that's on issues such as race, mobility, gender, age, and in terms of racial diversity, we as 4 brown women, this is not the first time we've had this conversation. But since the discussions restarted 6 months ago, do you see any kind of meaningful changes around you in the industry that kind of makes you think things are shifting now? Teresa, I'm going to come to you first.
Hi. Thank you all for having me. I appreciate it. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Have things changed? Things have changed in the world. Some of it is performative, and some of it is intentional, and I think will have meaningful impact moving forward. Certainly here in the United States, our judicial system has not changed as it relates to people of color. In regards to diversity and inclusion, things are changing, but it will take time to see if they settle in, if they become part of the system in the outdoor industry. You know, a lot of people talk about right now Black Lives Matter, but if I take a look at your board or your leadership and I don't see Black people, then that speaks louder than your message that Black Lives Matter. So it will take some time to see if the work people are doing currently is lasting or if it remains performative.
Do you, I mean, have you seen anything that makes you think that this could be for the long run now, or are things still looking quite, you know, at the early stages and you don't know quite where it's going just yet?
So when everyone's doing the same thing, it looks like it could be, you know, for the long haul. I see some brands, some outdoor brands making internal commitments to their employees around this, and that's good. I'm having conversations that I wasn't having this time last year. So my hope is that people are committed not only to their words, but the action that people are applying to their words. So there is hope, because for me in the outdoor industry, I've not seen this type of movement in the past. And it's sad that it's come on the heel of a pandemic and, you know, the murder of Black men and women in the United States. So my hope is that these brands are finally waking up, the industry is finally waking up, and that it will lend itself to other industries so that this change can be systemic versus just one industry over the next.
Portia, same question, but in terms of community, the people around you, have you noticed anything that makes you think, okay, like something seems different and there's a shift in consciousness at all? Or is it just, would you kind of echo the similar sentiments?
Well, a bit of both actually, and I think it does definitely depend where you are. I have been in the UK for the last 2 months, and I would say here, what's really interesting is my friends and family in the community with which I engage here are having very different reactions to things, and it's based around both Black Lives Matter and COVID. And when people see a video or a photo or they're watching a TV show, I've noticed that people will say, oh my God, did you see? She just like put her fingers in his glass, or all those people are standing so close to each other. And it's like, they've actually consciously become aware of the fact that it's now safe to be distant. And I would say the same thing is happening with racial diversity. So people will watch a video, and I'm talking about white friends. I'm not just talking about people of color who are perhaps more switched on to this. I'll watch a video, they'll see a TV show, they'll see an advert, and they'll say, oh my God, everyone is white. Everyone is white. And I know, and I'm going to speak honestly, actually, as a member of Regenerative Travel, when we put together this summit, there was a lot of commentary when the first social media post went up saying, there are too many white faces, there are not enough brown faces. And I don't think that that would have happened had we hosted this summit 7 months ago. So I am seeing in the community that I'm here in the UK with, and in the travel community, yes, I am seeing change, and I am seeing people of all colors and of all socioeconomic groups notice when something is off. But interestingly, I had a conversation with some of my team in Colombia just before I left, and we were talking about Black Lives Matter in America. And I was talking with African origin Colombians. Everyone is dark skinned. And I said to them, guys, how do you feel about this? Do you feel that this applies to you? And these guys said, like, no, not really. Like, you know, we don't really see that there's racism here where we are. You know, it's definitely something that's more an American problem. And I was like, do you guys know anyone with your skin color who's wealthy? And it was really interesting to see them go like, no. And I was like, do you know anyone here in Cartagena who is white, who is not wealthy? And it was interesting to see them say, no, we don't. And so I think there are still huge areas of the world where there isn't the information yet, and there is still systemic racism, and even the people suffering from it are not aware that it's happening. And so I agree with Teresa, we are on a journey, but I really do hope that it's here to stay. And I think it's because it is, you know, it has, in the rest of my life, I have seen it come across, you know, across a much bigger part of my community than I've ever noticed before.
I would echo the sentiment that, you know, I've personally started to see people kind of slip, well, brands actually slip back into kind of old homogenous ways in terms of, you know, marketing materials and representation in terms of, you know, other panels and whatever it is. Like, people slip back into their old ways very, very quickly because it's ingrained. But I mean, these are human rights issues first and foremost, but we've seen recently, I think, a kind of more shift into that sort of social impact sphere for the younger generation. Everybody seems to be very switched on with what's happening around them in terms of Gen Z particularly. And there seems to, I think this movement has been growing, I think, particularly with the conversations around sustainability and where brands put their money and what they kind of produce. So, I mean, how important is this Black Lives Matter, but also, you know, just having a diverse workforce and a diverse output? How important is that from a financial perspective? When you think of the bottom line, does that translate? Is that something that you're thinking, this is actually going to translate into sales here? Portia, I'd ask you that question actually.
So I had the great privilege to be involved in the conference with the man behind Chubby Diaries, which is a really well followed Instagram handle during the summer. And he's amazing. And he just said, anyone who isn't talking to Black Americans through their brand messaging is missing out on hundreds of millions of potential customers. And I think it is, you know, again, and I kind of covered this in my last session, if you can't be motivated by doing the right thing, just let financial motivation do its part. And there are more underrepresented groups than there are, and I'm just going to say the words, Caucasian males in the world. And so if we as brands are talking to a wide range of people, we are only opening our brands up to more consumers willing to spend money with us. So for me, it's just basic business, actually.
It's interesting because I read an article this morning for anyone who has access to the Times in London. In their business section, columnist called Satnam Sangara had written a column about how it is sensibly a fiscal thing. It's a sensible fiscal thing to do to support Black Lives Matter outwardly, to have, you know, to back things that you actually believe in, and that ends up translating. They use the example of Colin Kaepernick and Nike's support of him in terms of launching a campaign around him, and there was a lot of pushback at the time, and then ultimately recently they ran the metrics and there was a 35% growth in sales afterwards, because it's something that people need and want. And I think, you know, the way that people are traveling now may be changing, like for good, I would hope anyway. But I mean, these issues are ingrained. right? Change is not going to happen overnight. So I think we maybe have to break it down into short-term and longer-term changes. I mean, what is it that you kind of want to see in the short term? Harsh, I'm going to ask you that first, actually. Are there any kind of short-term changes that you kind of think, okay, these are more meaningful than what's kind of currently out there?
Hi. Well, thanks for having me, first of all. So the short-term changes, I think there's a lot that can be done when we think about sustainability. And I think, talking about diversity and inclusion, I think that it is a business strategy. Going back to what we were earlier saying, I think it is people think about it as an HR or marketing kind of strategy, but it really, to be successful, it has to be taken as a business strategy. And that was something I was watching on a keynote at eCornell recently. But I think the short-term changes is really just to look at the workforce. Travel companies need to start looking at their workforce and really look at them, and not just are they men or women or where are they from. I think it's, are they expat or are they local? And I think, are the local, if they are local, and if they are the majority local, which is quite rare, I think, but fortunate. But if they are local, are they in the management positions? And if they're not in the management positions, do they need additional training to be in the management positions? And do you need to invest in them? I think the short-term changes is really just to look at your existing workforce and also look at the treatment between the guest and the employee. And I say that because, recently, or even, I've spent a lot of time working in resort locations like the Maldives. And I think that if you look at the different benefits you get, whether you're a guest or an employee, or whether you're an employee at entry level or in management or expat, as I was, I mean, simple things like where you can swim in the ocean. Can you swim in the ocean? Can you swim near the guest? I think these are benefits that really affect the level of happiness of the employees. And so something that we're looking at Saira, and I'm sure many people are looking at, having caught some of this summit, which has been really interesting, is that looking at employee happiness is kind of a key metric. And so obviously, as we know, as hoteliers who are mostly on today, the levels of happiness that an employee has will directly affect the level of service the guest receives. So really focusing on that as almost like a Saira standard or stamp is something we want to look at, because we do believe that that is an easy to implement step for hotels and travel companies to take when they're looking at not just inclusion and diversity, but the general bottom line. Because Portia, as you mentioned, it's no secret that the more diverse a workplace is and a workforce is, the more successful and productive the company is. So
I'm just going to pop on something you touched on, which I think we tend to see a lot, particularly in the Caribbean, I would say, but also in India. There seems to be a lot of general managers or kind of high-level management positions that are sourced elsewhere. So you tend to go to a resort and not see very many kind of local people, unless they are, maintenance staff or waiters or and that seems to be something that's ingrained in the industry. Like they seem to search out execs from business schools and hospitality schools and all of these sorts of stuff. How easy is that to change and implement, and also how damaging is that? I mean, in terms of how people are wanting to travel, but also if you're truly selling a kind of idea of this is a local, we're local, we're embracing everything there is here. How does that seem disingenuous then, like having high-level execs that are not local?
I think that's a bit of a rhetorical question. But I agree with you. We've seen that.
I want you to say something. No, I'm joking. Carry on.
But till today, we've seen that, right, all over the world. And you often go, I'm living in New York at the moment, and you go to Southeast Asia and you meet the GM from New York, and it's not interesting necessarily. No offense to the GM, but I think that it takes 90 days, right, to make any kind of change, personal or professional. And we've been in this pandemic for 6 months, so I think we're going to start seeing changes. I think that it is obviously disingenuous, but if you think about it, as a, hotel operator or owner, it's surprising, when you realize that there is talent in the local community around you. And we just train for entry level. And I'm quite passionate about staying at that level, because the goal is to get people off the streets and into hotels through entry level. But so I understand that there's a surprise when you're like, oh, I can actually hire my entry level workforce from the local community. But I think it's just an assumption, right? I think there's a lot of assumptions when hotels open to say, oh, we're not going to find a GM here, and it's easier and it's quicker and it's way more expensive and it's much less sustainable to bring in the expat who's worked at the Four Seasons or a reputable brand abroad, but they're not respected by the local team. And I don't know that they're really respected by the guest, who's now today seeking the local experience from the top to the bottom. So I would agree with you that it's not necessarily.
You have to agree with me. That was a very
rhetorical. It isn't as rhetorical as it sounds. I will jump in defense of hotels that do have foreign management, and again, total transparency. Our Colombian manager for our city hotel during COVID was offered another job, and he went off to take it. And I've actually just promoted a Frenchman and a Venezuelan to take his place. And that means that the senior management team of the two hotels that I run is made up of a Hungarian, a Venezuelan, and a Frenchman. And that is potentially problematic. But when you are a small hotel, I think there is also another way of looking at it, which is that they are really actually relating to our staff. And what I love about these guys is they're living in Colombia because they love it. They're engaged with the local community. They have amazing relationships with the people that they're working with. And they are each training people below them to eventually come up and take their place. And I think if you're looking at a young hotel or a small hotel, having foreigners in senior levels, firstly, it's not always what it seems. The average wage in Hungary is the same as the average wage in Colombia. But also it's sometimes a question of actually having international interaction. And I know that some of my staff are so proud that they work with a Hungarian, and they're looking forward to travel to visit Nicole when they can, COVID kind of wiped this out, but they had savings and they were looking forward to travel. And I would hate for the industry to lose that kind of international element. I think the real danger is when you have big brands that just have it as a matter of policy, that the GM will always be imported from France, or the GM will always be imported from Lausanne Hospitality School. And I think what you have to ask a hotel is, you might have a foreign manager right now, but are you actively training somebody local to take their place, so that if a hotel has been operating in a place for 5 years, 6 years, 7 years, they should now have been able to create a training scheme in order to bring local people up to management. So I think there is nuance. I don't think we need to travel around the world, kind of requesting that hotels fire their foreign management teams, but I think we need to ask the question, what are you doing as a hotel to bring local people into management? How are you demonstrating that commitment?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it is one of those, particularly for big brands, like you say, it's that, we see a lot of them having had the experience of, say, I'm just throwing this name out there, Four Seasons, and they'll have worked in a Four Seasons and they'll have worked at, AGM level, whatever it is, and then they'll move over just because they have experience of, I don't know, pre-opening or whatever it is, and then they'll get brought over and whatever. So you see the logic, right? But there's also, you're right, there needs to be some kind of system or structure in place that actually, because then you hear about hotels that are changing hands, particularly in the Caribbean or wherever it is, and you hear of a manager, hotel manager, whoever it is, that's been there for 25 years. But again, and not getting particularly the same opportunities. Sorry, carry on, Harsha.
No, I was just going to say, I think promoting from within, Portia, which is what it sounds like you're doing, obviously is the alternative. But I think, Shivani, we're talking about the big brands who, especially when they open, not when you're already open, but when you open and you just make that assumption that the talent doesn't lie in that community. I think that's kind of the difference. I don't think we should go around firing everyone who's not necessarily local, but really it kind of brings to the question of what is local, right? And so if someone's living there, they say in New York, you've got to be living there for 8 years to be a New Yorker. And what are the rules to being local? So if your team has been living and breathing and, part immersed in that community, then they are local. It doesn't matter about skin color necessarily.
It's an interesting topic, actually, and I think particularly in this industry, in every form of it, we see local kind of bandied around as a plaster basically for everything. It's like, oh, we're local, here's some gin, here's some beer, here's some artwork on the wall. But when it comes down to it, how much are they actually supporting local? Like, particularly in terms of the pandemic, we've seen that a lot. You know, entire communities and local businesses have really fallen on hard times. And, you know, there have been a lot of businesses of really fantastic hotels who have really walked the walk. Like, they are local. They're, you know, they're putting up emergency workers. They're, you know, helping, you know, helping the people around them. And I think that's when it ultimately begins to show. But what does it mean to you, Portia, local? As a word, what does it mean to you?
I think it's how engaged you are. I don't feel like a local anywhere anymore since I left my own country over a decade ago. And I've lived in 3 countries since then. I think it's how engaged you are, how respectful you are the local people your friends. I have issue with the terminology expat, and have never understood why some people get to be expats and others are immigrants. And I think that's something that actually I'd love to hear Teresa's opinion on, because language is so important. So I would say that immigrants can very often be local and expats very rarely are. But mostly, yeah, engagement with the community.
That is something that we hear a lot. But I think it also speaks to, I think, marketing in a lot of ways. Like, it comes down to what messaging you're putting out there about, you know, the values that you hold as a brand, as a company, as a hotel. But we often see, and this is something that on my side of the fence in journalism that I see all the time, the images that are sent out by brands, by marketing managers, by PRs, a lot of them look the same. And it's a big issue when I speak to my editors and I say, like, we need some more representation in the pages. And they said, yeah, but we also need to speak to the PRs because what we're getting from them is not lining up. Just how detrimental is that to see really homogenous looking images for marginalized communities, seeing the same old faces over and over again? Teresa, like, that must put people off from your perspective, no?
I started doing this work after, you know, seeing marketing campaigns and seeing no one that looked like me or people of color in general, seeing white men climb, white men hike, just seeing everything white. It's frustrating. And what I try to tell people is that, look, you can come along willingly or we can drag you along, because the demographic shift that's taking place across this world is happening. It's not like the shift is going to wait for white America to be comfortable. You either come along willingly or you're dragged along, period. So when, you know, I open a magazine or I take to social media and all I see are models that are white, male, white, female, I reach out to these companies directly and I make them aware that you're not speaking to your incoming audience, you're speaking to your outgoing audience. And I think that's what people need to understand, is that if you're not bringing in, you know, people from underrepresented communities, then absolutely your bottom line will suffer, period. Because what's starting to happen is that communities of color and other underrepresented communities are now beginning to create their own. And they're bringing along other people that look like them, which is taking away from, you know, established companies. And eventually that will become the norm. That's why every morning I wake up, I see a new affinity group that's formed. You know, be it from a community of color, someone from a able differently community, body diversity communities. We are starting to create our own because we do not feel that mainstream anything, any industry is taking us into consideration. You know, it's odd. I hadn't even thought about this, but I've been on the road for the past 4 months, staying in hotels. And I just realized I have not seen one person that looks like me. And I won't mention the brand, the hotel, but not one person in any position that I've seen represented in this hotel has been a person of color.
It's interesting.
The fact that I can now look back and see that, I'm getting mad now. So I'll be reaching out to this hotel brand to speak to them about that.
You should. I think from where I'm sitting anyway, and I don't do too much in it, but the adventure industry and the outdoor industry does seem to be largely pale, stale, and male. Like they literally just, there was one demographic that seems to overrun this, and you don't see any variation in body type or skin color or gender at all, right? I mean, that's kind of how it looks from the outside, but it must be even worse when you're in it.
Absolutely it is. And you know, there's a show in Denver, Colorado, when the world was open, called the Outdoor Retailer Show, and people flocked, thousands of people flocked to that gathering from the outdoor industry, everyone from Nike to Merrill to Patagonia, we all flock. And I recall going there for the first time about 3 years ago, and I literally just stood there gazing into a sea of whiteness, 3 levels of a convention center, nothing but white everywhere. And I do this work on diversity and inclusion, and I was still shocked at that. So it's like every industry is dealing with this right now. So for me, it's like, why are you all coming together to address this? It's not just the outdoor industry. It's not just the hotel industry. It's tech, it's design, it's everything. Why is it that in every industry we're dealing with this? And it's because people aren't moving beyond the moment. They will address something in that moment, but it doesn't linger into the future. And that's what we need to focus on.
So what's the first step that travel companies can take towards long-term change, particularly in your side of the industry, in the adventure outdoor sector? What's the first step to take for long-term change?
People are going to have to give up power. And that's what this is all about, is people trying to maintain that power structure. And that's not realistic, because the demographic shift and in regards to race is shifting. So people are going to have to grow comfortable with being uncomfortable, and not only addressing these issues, but changing what the image of their leadership and their board looks like. So the first step is growing comfortable with the changes that have to be. If you want to maintain yourself in business, look at all these businesses that are falling by the wayside right now because of the pandemic. Part of that has to do with their customer base. So had they extended their customer base prior to the pandemic, perhaps they would have been able to withstand the pandemic. But when your customer base looks like you, white and male, white and female, then eventually that's going to fall by the wayside. So the first step is to grow comfortable with the changes that are inevitable.
Harsha, you work a lot with hotels directly.
Yep.
What's the first thing you tell them when they want to create more kind of community impact and kind of build a more kind of value-led structure?
Yeah. So we do pop-up hotel schools. It's a very obvious way to connect with the community. You're training local community. So that builds years. It's a very deep relationship that's formed between the hotel and the community when you give education. But if we weren't to do a school and just thinking separate, what we're launching now is the CSR, corporate social responsibility, for those who don't know it, on this conference, the CSR menu. And I think that's really easy for anyone to do. It's not just us. I think it should just be something that hotels do. And it's an easy way for hotels and guests to be able to give back and to empower the community. And I think it's super simple. I think you have to think outside of the hotel, which is one of the things I think hotels struggle with, but build those relationships in the community. And it takes a while, you know, and we can do it easily through the school, but without the school, I think there are ways to get to know the community and kind of recruit this board of advisors within the community. These are the steps that we're going to take. And kind of 5 or 3 to 5 kind of key players that the community respects. And what we often do is take the Mandela approach, where you listen before you just assume that they want a football field or whatever it is that they want. And, you know, you understand their needs, and it's something often very simple like transport or like clean water or whatever it is. And you list that out in a menu, and then you offer that to the guest who today is looking to give back during their stay often. And you say, what do you want to donate? Do you want to donate time, or do you want to donate money? And how long do you have? And I think that's, you know, a really easy step for the hotels to get to know the communities and also get their buy-in, and also secure the long-term kind of return on a move like that when you enter a new neighborhood.
Portia, what about you? I mean, would you kind of agree with what's been said so far, or would you like to add anything more?
Yeah, I think it's interesting when Teresa says you have to be prepared to give up power. And I think you have to be prepared to give up some old-fashioned concepts as well. So I think a huge one for business owners is to be able to give up a little bit that money is the only thing that matters. And I've had some really kind of, I don't know, they don't make me uncomfortable anymore, conversations with people who've said to me, well, we just don't put Black people in our social media because they don't get as many likes, and like our customers aren't really Black. So, you know, we're not racist, it's just not really our demographic. And like, we don't mind if Black people come, and we want more Black people to come, but like, you know, they don't really interact with us. So what's the point of putting them on our social media? And I'm like, and it's, you know, maybe it's a bit simple to say it, but if you put Black people on your social media, if you put women on your social media, if you put people in larger bodies on your social media, if you put people who might have disabilities on your social media, you might not get the next day like an entire new demographic walking in the door. You might not get as many likes as you have got on the, you know, when you posted a thin white girl in a bikini with blue eyes and blonde hair, because you are changing the conversation that you're having and the audience that you're having it with, and that is going to take time. And so I think when you look at the long term, it's saying, okay, giving up power at the top of the chain in the company, but it's also giving up your expectation of likes or immediate responses, and understanding that it's maybe going to take 6 months of posting underrepresented groups before they start to engage with you. And I love what Teresa said about maybe you would survive the pandemic better if you've been a more decent company to begin with. And you know, one of the kind of point scorers when you become a benefit corporation, a B Corp, is what percentage of your client base is local. And people in travel tend to say like, oh, well, that just can't really apply to us because, you know, travel is specifically not for local people. But in our 2 hotels, we have made a huge effort to kind of win the love of the local community. And we have discount cards for cocktails at our bar in the city. And we offer local people discounted or free boat transport to the islands. And what that means is we have a really loyal customer base. So while borders are closed, but we can reopen, we have clients. And there are other hotels that have just never made that effort. And so I think, yeah, it's a question of just like giving up power, giving up your expectations for immediate financial return, and settling for long-term change, and actually the feeling of just not being a dick by making your property or your business more accessible to more people. And I'm sorry for swearing, but sometimes there's just no other way to say it.
No, I love that. No, I mean, I think it's to me, I mean, we hear so much about sustainability as a concept, and, you know, people wanting to give back, do the right thing, like sustain the life of the planet, blah, blah, blah. But there's less said about the social side of it. I know you and I touched on that, Portia, the other day. But why do you think that's the case? Why do you think that there's so little discourse around the social side of sustainability and where that ties in. And maybe can you explain it for people who don't know that sustainability, you know, the term sustainability or the industry or the bracket, whatever you want to call it, means more than just the ecological, environmental side of things. I mean, how would you connect the two?
I think it's because people are really difficult. We all are. And if you are passionate about doing the right thing and you say, I'm going to have this hotel and it's, you know, all my staff are going to be trained and they're going to be managers within 18 months and everyone's going to have language programs and it's just going to be this kind of like paradise of social advancement and development. And I'm also going to install solar panels. I'm going to go off grid. I'm going to be like plastic free. What you will find is that you go and you buy a solar panel and you stick it in your garden and it just does what you force it to do. And then, you know, you start to kind of recycle your glass and that works as it's meant to. And you are treating your environmental surroundings in a certain way and it is responding in that way. And the thing, of course, with people is that we aren't like that. We don't learn languages quickly. We have other parts of our life that mean that perhaps it takes us longer to engage with a training program. We have been taught how to recycle, but we still don't put the paper in the right bin. And I think what happens is that time-pressed, resource-pressed, you know, stressed out business owners just eventually kind of lose the will and they say, well, I'm just going to go down the environmental route because everything that I plan happens. Whereas with the people routes, I have the best laid plans and people always get in the way of it. And I think, you know, and I say that because I'm also a really difficult person. You know, it took me until I was in my 30s to be able to sort my recycling the right way. And that wasn't because I think I'm mentally incapable of doing it. It was just laziness. It wasn't my priority. I had other stuff going on. And I think so that's why people perhaps sometimes kind of disengage. But of course, the irony is that if you haven't got people on board and if you haven't got a workforce who are happy and safe and well paid and are not worried about, you know, paying their electricity bill or feeding their children, if you aren't there, then you are not going to have a workforce that is really bothered about plastic straws or water management or recycling. So I understand why it's easy to give up on us as people, but it's also really important to understand that, you know, one hotel owner trying desperately to do the right thing environmentally is not the same as a staff of 50 all doing the right thing environmentally. And the staff of 50 are not going to do it unless their baseline of life contentment is up here. And that's why I think one hotel owner should make 50 staff's baseline up here, so that then there's a team of people who can kind of attack the environmental problem.
Do you think that there's a bit of a, Teresa, I'm going to ask you this, do you think there's a kind of gulf in understanding that in terms of environmental planetary sustainability, you know, and the people talking a lot about that, and forgetting that not everybody wants to sustain the life of the planet as it is, if you're being systemically persecuted, and you know, not everybody's starting from the same place, right? Do you think, you touched on kind of performative action earlier on, do you think that that's a part of why, you know, that there's not that kind of consciousness there? And would you agree with that sentiment, perhaps?
The problem is simply people are not looking at the intersectionality between sustainability and human beings, period. There's a connection that we are not connecting. And that's human. You know, that doesn't have anything to do with black or white. That's human. We want to work on one issue and ignore the fact that it's attached to other issues. And when it comes to sustainability, I think as a person of color and working with communities of color, this has always been part of our history. It's always been how we've done things. Like when our mothers or our grandmothers would reuse a bag over and over and over again. We didn't look at that as being sustainability. We looked at that as our grandmother or our mother being cheap. But that's the way we've always done things in our culture, in Latin and Latino communities here in the US, Native American communities, African American communities. We've always practiced these things, but we didn't put a title to it. So that's when I say we're missing the intersectionality of it all. I think if we continue to understand that if I touch over here, I'm actually connected over here as well. So we're missing the connections, and that's part of this work, period. People feel that they are separate from others, and we're not. We're all one, and every effort we take on is attached. So I think we need to move away from looking to one community to do something a certain way, because it's all together. We need to do away with these isms. And once we begin to do that, I think everything else will fall into line. So sustainability around environmental protection, that's the purpose behind all of this. Eventually, we're going to jack up the environment to the point where it's just not sustainable for any of us to be here anymore. So, and we are dang near there now. Look at all the fires that are breaking out in the United States. Look at all the damage that we've done to the environment. And part of that is that we're not bringing in communities who have dealt with these issues forever. Native Americans have always dealt with the environment on a different level. And that was sustainable until the white man came in and tried to alter it. Now look at where we are. We need to bring in these communities and their beliefs and the way they've interacted with the environment for generations to better understand what we need to do as a people. And I don't mean just people in the United States. I mean people across this world, to try and slow down global warming, climate change. We can't stop it because we've just jacked it up to the point where there's no stopping. But perhaps if we come together, we can slow the effects of our ignorance over generations.
Well, I mean, do you think there's a problem with people thinking that that problem is over there? So whether that's the fires or whether that is, you know, police brutality in the States, or, you know, whatever the issue is, it's just like, okay, well, that's happening over there, so I don't have to do anything about it here. And what's your advice for people, say, following in a different country and not seeing, you know, not perhaps being able to immediately recognize the same kind of systemic persecution, or just, you know, effects of climate change immediately around them? Like, well, where's the best place to start?
By looking in the mirror and saying that I'm part of the problem. Because, you know, we can be so far removed from a problem that we feel it's not affecting us. You know, people act as if because I'm, you know, a person of color and you're white, that climate change is going to somehow skip your neighborhood and come directly to mine. That's not how it works. It's going to jack us all up. It already is equally. It may be slower to reach some neighborhoods, but it's going to reach your neighborhood too. And it's you can't live indoors all the time. You have to go outside some point. So you're going to breathe in that bad air too. So your purifiers and your air filters will not stop the fact that climate change is coming to your community. So I think people have to get out of this bubble they're in and thinking that affects communities of color or underrepresented communities will never affect me. The pandemic has shown that's not the case. So if we don't come together as human beings, I don't know where the hope is, because we keep removing ourselves from problems as if they will not affect us. We have to lose that mentality that, oh, them, not us. That's what we have to move away from.
We see a lot, I think, particularly at the moment, about volunteerism. It seems to be the new kind of buzzword, like we'll go over somewhere and we will help, you know, a school or an NGO, or we'll engage with this person on our holidays. Is that, I want to talk to you about that, Harsha. Like, is that problematic in thinking? I mean, what advice would you give to brands that are maybe opting that approach, or does that tie into kind of the concept of white saviorism at all? Like, should they be starting this kind of work at home? Like, what would you say to just the concept of volunteerism? I mean, obviously there's nothing inherently wrong with the idea of charity or aid, so I'm curious as to how you look at it.
Well, that's what I was going to say. I think, you know, it's not for me or for anyone to say where and when someone should start to play their role. And often it can be at home. You know, when I started doing the work that we do, I was thinking, oh, we have to go really far away, and Lagos and Nigeria and India and all these places that I was quite familiar with. But really in New York, right around the corner, there was a project that was dealing with women who were sex trafficked, you know, in a hidden kind of corner in Midtown. So I think, look, I don't think there's anything necessarily wrong with volunteerism. I'm not really comfortable with that term, but I think that anyone who wants to help, whether it's at home or on holiday, it's not for me to say. I just think just be grateful that person really does want to help. But I think, yes, there are assumptions that you arrive and, you know, just like Teresa was saying, it's them, not us, right? So it's constantly that mentality. What do they need? What did they you know, like what would we, they don't have this, but we have that, and so this is what we should bring here, you know, to this community. And I think it's the same as what I've been saying. You have to just, you know, you have to listen first, and you have to understand their needs, and ask people what it is that they need help with, and then you kind of act accordingly. And it can be really powerful. I think volunteerism, or, you know, anything about giving back is something that can be really, really powerful, which is, you know, when we take volunteers to our schools. But don't come to the schools and take photos with the students, and then, you know, it's not that kind of trip, you know. But if you're giving, give fully, and don't go for kind of the photo experience. That's something that I personally have difficulty with when we've had trainers in the past do that. So I think in terms of social impact and giving back, I think it's a really simple way of listening to what the need is, and then acting upon that.
I'm just going to ask a quick question that we've had come through from Tara over the Q&A. Do you find it, I'm going to ask all three of you really, I mean, do you find it problematic that brands are jumping onto the BLM movement as an example, as a business strategy? Is it not hollowing out or co-opting an important movement by turning BIPOC into consumers, a new market demographic for white-owned industries, rather than addressing the real issues related to social justice and systemic change? Teresa, do you want to start us off?
There absolutely is a problem with that. If you weren't saying Black Lives Matter 6 months ago, why are you saying it today? Is it because your counterparts are doing it? So that's the problem with, you know, companies anywhere saying Black Lives Matter, because all I have to do again is look at your leadership, look at your boards. Are there any Black people there? If the answer is no, then clearly Black Lives Matter do not matter to your company. So you know, just because brand X says it, and it's a ripple effect. It's now everyone feels the need to do it. And are there some brands that are standing behind that and doing the work? Absolutely there are, absolutely. But there are also brands that are, you know, reaching out to me asking to sign the diversity pledge, and they lead off with, because Black Lives Matter. I'm like, no, you can't sign the pledge. That's not why you sign the pledge, because Black Lives Matter. Black Lives Matter is an easy thing to point to, but show me the work. If I go and I look at your social media page, will I see Black people there? Will I see people of color? Your social media campaigns tell me more about you, tell us more about you than any message you can put out. It's simple. You know, there's a company out here called Burton. It's a ski company. They put out an amazing statement about 2 weeks ago about the moment we're in and their commitment to diversity and inclusion. It was an amazing statement, shockingly amazing, because here's a white company and they literally said in their statement, in their public statement, that we have not taken matters of diversity and inclusion seriously. It's time for us to wake the fuck up. That is literally the statement they put out publicly. And that's a statement that I can look back on in 3 months and say, Burton, this is what you said. I want to see the work behind that. So yeah, there's a lot of performative stuff happening right now. But don't point to Black Lives Matter as the reason you're doing this work. Point to the fact that it's vital, it's important, it's relevant as to why you're doing this work. We as Black people are not a poster. We are human beings like everyone else. And we want people to commit to this work because it's the right thing to do, period.
I think that's a great note to end on, unless Harsha or Portia, you have anything more to add. I'm being told to wrap up, but if you have anything more, then I think we maybe have 1 more minute.
I don't think anyone can say it better than Teresa.
I know.
I really wanted to say amen.
Wake the fuck up, because yeah, I mean, well, I'm not.
And then I guess one last thing, which is, of course, BIPOC people, people of color, Black people, people with disabilities, we aren't made consumers. We also have active choice and agency in the decisions that we make. So if there is a brand as cynical as to think that they can put BLM and not get called BS, then I think that they're going to see consumers voting with their feet. And I love to see everybody now putting their hand in their pocket and realizing how much power they have. So, you know, if a brand wants to be cynical and lie, let them, but it'll hit their bottom line eventually.
I would agree with a lot of what's been said, but I would also just say really quickly that it's better than not saying it. And I agree, if it is bullshit, if we're swearing on this panel, then fuck it. But if it is bullshit, then yeah, you have to follow up with it. But isn't it better to say it than not say it, than to say nothing at all? I mean, that's kind of where I come from. Yes, back it up, but say it at least, because obviously,
as long as it never becomes meaningless. You just don't want it to become something that's like, oh, that thing, you know, Black Lives Matter. Like, I think it has to, we don't want to damage the power behind words. But
yeah,
otherwise,
but
I'm inclined to agree with Harsha that talking about everything is better than not talking about it.
Better than not saying anything, which is what we've been doing for decades. At least they're saying something.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's true.
I'll stop talking on that note.
Well, it's good.
Let's
These
see the work.
conversations are happening. And I just want to say a quick thank you to all of you for your insights. It's been wonderful. I've loved chatting to all of you. And a big thank you to Regenerative Travel for a great summit. And yeah, for having 4 brown women on a panel. Long may it continue.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
And just as we wrap that panel up and prepare for the next one, I think it's worth mentioning that these are in fact not Instagram handles, in the interests of promoting people's professional background rather than their physical image. These are their LinkedIn profile connections. So feel free to reach out to all of us that were on that panel. Well, welcome back, everybody. And we move into the last of our panels from this 3-day summit. And really one of the ones that I am most excited about. How do we create more regenerative travelers? Our moderator for this panel is the very impressive Ben Pundle. Ben is an award-winning hospitality entrepreneur, founder of an online travel platform called A Hotel Life. He's most recognized for his work developing Ian Traeger's luxury lifestyle brand Edition in partnership with Marriott International. As Vice President of Brand Experience, Ben is responsible for crafting the brand identity via brand marketing, partnerships, cultural programming, events, PR, social media, and I mean, pretty much anything else you can imagine. So Ben is definitely a man who knows about connecting with consumers. Ben, I will hand over to you to introduce the rest of the panel and enjoy yourselves. I'm excited to hear what you have to say.
Thank you so much. How do we create more regenerative travelers? Such a fascinating topic. Very excited to be here. Thank you so much, the Regenerative Travel Summit, for having us. Thank you, Amanda, for the invitation. And thank you to the incredible group of panelists that we have today. Firstly, can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Great.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Then I'm going to do a quick introduction to everybody. Anna Pollock, welcome, the founder of Conscious Travel, often described as irrepressibly curious and creative, ahead of her time, a visionary, and she started Conscious Travel as an alternative to mass industrial tourism. Brilliant, thank you, Anna. Dana Krauskopf, founder of the award-winning Hamanasi Adventure and Dive Resort, a boutique eco resort in Belize. Yes, please. Welcome. Jake Halpert, where are you? Co-founder of the Transformative Travel Council. Jake initially founded Evergreen Escapes in 2006, which he had exited out of in 2018. Jake is dedicated to unleashing travel superpowers in transforming self and society. Jake has a futuristic perspective with a pragmatic, actionable approach. Welcome, Jake. Janice, hi. Been really wanting to meet you. Janice, Director of Corporate Responsibility and Sustainability Officer at Peninsula Hotels, named by Forbes magazine as one of the world's most influential sustainability leaders. And at age 30, she co-developed the initial mathematical and economic modeling that was the basis for international aviation's carbon neutral growth strategy. Incredible. Janice, welcome. Martinique, is Martinique with us? Not sure.
Okay. She is.
Great. Martinique, president of the Black Travel Alliance, is a diversity and travel consultant who is immensely in love with all things travel and is continually advocating for travelers that represent different demographics across multiple platforms. Her mission is to change the face of tourism forever, so that we all feel represented and see ourselves reflected. Incredible. Hi, Martinique. And Neil needs no introduction, the CEO of Six Senses. Thank you for joining us, Neil. Neil's passion for wellness, sustainability, and for making travel more purposeful has resulted in an exciting expansion of the brand, with hotels being developed in Israel, India, Iceland, and the Galapagos, to name a few. Neil believes in creating demand through constant innovation, initiatives, and meaningful programming, while ensuring that local communities benefit and that the resorts operate in harmony with the natural world. If only everyone were like you, Neil. So an incredible group of panelists, and thoroughly looking forward to chatting with you all. Thank you for joining. I'm your moderator, Ben Pundol, and let's kick off with how do we create more regenerative travelers? Well, before we go into the main body of the questions, what, in your opinion, is a regenerative traveler? Anna, maybe we could start with you.
Well, I'd like to think a regenerative traveler is somewhat like I call a conscious traveler, someone who's making mindful choices about where they go, how often they go, the choices about the places they stay in, the destinations they visit, and want really for their trip to not only bring them the opportunity to grow and develop and to regenerate, to revitalize themselves, but to have an impact in the communities that they're visiting in some way, shape, or form. And that could be as simple as your choice of place that you stay, because your money is going into a place that's already doing regenerative work. I tend to focus more on the regenerative host or the regenerative supply side. I think that's where we really do need to start. But I hope that gives you an idea of what a regenerative traveler is.
It certainly does. Martinique, what's your opinion about the regenerative traveler? What does that mean to you?
To be honest, before when I first got asked to speak on this panel, I had the same exact question. I said, well, what defines, a regenerative traveler? And I honestly was not sure. But after hearing her definition, that helps me a little bit more to understand exactly what we might think a regenerative traveler is. And so what I'm hearing from her, which makes sense, is someone who does things intentionally, a traveler who travels intentionally, whether it's for the betterment of themselves or betterment of the community that they're going to travel to, and how they can serve within those actual spaces. So that's what I think. But honestly, like I said, who is defining what this means? So
we are. This is it. These are the six people forevermore will define the regenerative traveler. Neil, you're constantly in contact with I guess regenerative travelers. How would you describe them?
I think they're evolving as well, and I think what this pandemic has done is kind of brought out, as Anna was saying, a kind of a greater level of consciousness around people that are traveling. I think we see also a greater degree of kindness and connection between people, and we've had a lot of time to think about all that during this period. I think the traveler is someone that is demanding more purpose than perhaps they did in the past, that is compelled in one form or another to contribute something when they go on the road or go away, and is also looking for a takeaway. I think it's both about giving to those communities and places that they go, but also trying to figure out what's the payback in some way? What can they take away emotionally, spiritually, and opportunistically, so that it becomes a win-win for both sides, actually. So, but certainly it's clearly way more conscious than it was perhaps before.
I agree. Well said. And Dana?
I think we've had 3 excellent definitions of it, and I would agree with all of them, particularly that it's an evolving concept. And I think if I were to kind of reduce it, I would say it is a way for an individual who travels, who wants to make a difference to the community and the environment of the destination, as well as the rewards that they intrinsically also gain by that interaction and improvement.
Well said. And Jake, what's the regenerative traveler to you?
Yeah, to me, I feel like it's a mindset. Yeah, regenerative travelers are bringing a growth mindset, and they have an awareness and how they fit into the ecosystem, into the destination, the communities that they visit. And they know that there's an interconnectedness, and they're fitting in, and this is a symbiotic relationship. So I think that those who are regenerative travelers that are looking to participate in that type of experience, they are sharply aware of impact, and are making choices that support their own engagement and the impact that they're having.
Mm-hmm. Well said. And Janice?
Yeah, I just wanted to add that I'll agree with all the definitions that the rest of the panels have said. But for me, working on sustainability inside the hospitality industry, I wish that this would be the mainstreaming of this type of traveler. This is the whole point why we do embed sustainability into our operations, in the guest experience, because we would like to see more guests wanting to travel this way. So that's really the objective for us.
We would, absolutely. So let me recap for a second then. So the regenerative traveler is one that's ever evolving, with kindness and consciousness and intention and purpose, connectedness and awareness, that's aware of their impact. It sounds like the perfect human. Hopefully they've also got money that can push hotel rates and occupancy. So let's find them all and be very nice to them. So with that said, why is regeneration now more important than ever for the post-pandemic traveler? Who would like to take that? Why is this an important time?
I think certainly from our perspective at Six Senses, we're built on, as you know, Ben, on this platform of both wellness and sustainability, and both were relevant before COVID, but certainly are even more relevant than they were before. I'm kind of one of those that believes that coming out of this pandemic, that we're never going to be the same as we were before. My millennial kids don't think so, but I think so. And coming back to what I said earlier about that awareness of what's going on in the world and that need to contribute, I think we're going to see so much more of that. I agree with Janice, obviously, on the sustainability piece, but also on the wellness. I mean, frankly, sustainability and wellness today are pretty much, to me, they become the same thing. They merge. We're just going to see so much more of it, and that's the good piece that's coming out of what we're going through now.
And if I could add, I believe that on a fundamental level, our basic responsibility is the safety of our guests and our employees. And of course, there's heightened awareness of that. And I believe that regenerative resorts prioritize that on a fundamental level. That is something that we do on a very basic part of who we are. So in the time of COVID, I feel like regenerative resorts are a step ahead because that is already a part of who we are.
Well said. I think yes, absolutely, but I also think we've got a long way to go. Anna, what's your take? Anna, you're muted.
Yes, I attempted to unmute myself, but it didn't work. Okay, I agree very much with what Dana has said. I think there's a real link between the concept of regeneration and health in the broadest sense of the word. None of us can operate businesses in an unhealthy environment, which is unhealthy perhaps physically and or socially. I think we want to enjoy the privilege of travel, and I do see travel more as a privilege than as a right. Then we're going to have to change the way we do tourism. The operating model that has brought us to this incredible place that we're in right now, in terms of the size of the industry pre-COVID and its impact, I would argue is running out of steam. It was based on volume, based on growth. As many people as we could push through, it was based on very much an extractive model. Sustainability is a step in the right direction, but it wasn't proving to be enough because we continued to keep growing. So regeneration is so much more than that. It's a completely new way of thinking. It's a completely new frame in terms of our relationship with the planet and with each other. It's a quantum leap. And as Jake was saying, it's a mindset shift. It's big enough that it's going to take all of our lives, I think, to see it come into full fruition. We're at the beginning of a curve, a beginning of a fundamental paradigm shift, but it's one that the tourism industry has to participate in. And that's why this initiative from regenerative travel and regenerative resorts is so exciting.
I think it's very well said there, Anna. Not only does the travel industry, the travel hotel industry need to participate, it needs to lead the way. It needs to be pioneers because we're the ones more than most that are crossing borders. And it's so many more than physical borders we need to cross, which, and I'm sorry to move on, but I'm going to, when companies or industries talk about sustainability or regeneration, they usually have a focus on environmental sensitivity or sustainability with a focus on the environment. But that's not the world we're living in. So what are the ways the travel industry and your companies are implementing change with regards to social and civil regeneration? Because that's equally as important, in my opinion.
Yeah. Well, it's education. I mean, to me, it starts with education, and certainly for us, it's education of our employees that we call hosts and our families, and we have this pretty intense program called Mission Wellness that really is all about that and is providing programmatically all kinds of content around wellness and sustainability that people can use both at work but also at home. And then there's funding, obviously, with local groups and NGOs. And we did swimming lessons in the Maldives. We clean drinking water, accessibility. So it's all about that. I mean, it's program after program, and not each one has to be a huge, big event, but it's the small stuff, just lots of the small stuff that ultimately makes impact.
What about diversity and inclusion programs? I mean, Martinique, this is something that you focus on with a huge passion. Who have you seen that has been, or who are you working with that's really focusing on giving better opportunities to a broader spectrum of the population?
Yeah, I think with the last question and with this one, one of the things that is an underlying just theme of COVID is that all of these issues we're talking about now, we were talking about before COVID. But since COVID has us in the house, we're not allowed to travel. And now we're all in the house and we're focused now on the issues that have surrounded the travel industry for years. So, you know, sustainability in travel, diversity in travel, these are not new things that we just started talking about. These are things that people have been fighting for years and years, that nobody wanted to talk about, that nobody wanted to address. But until we all had to sit down and be in our houses and really come to ourselves in front of the mirror and say, this is what needs to happen in this industry so that we can change it. Up until now, we have not been able to do that. So it's just interesting now that something like COVID-19 would make the whole travel industry be more mindful of our environment and everybody who considers themselves a traveler. So it's always interesting to see the dynamics, because it's like, well, why didn't we care before? And why do we care so much now? Why is the emphasis so much now when we're trying to get people to come out of their homes and travel a little bit more? But I digress. In terms of diversity and inclusion, like I said, in the travel industry, it's mindfulness. Does your destination, does your business, does your organization, does it adhere to every type of traveler? Is there a traveler that feels left out because they don't see themselves reflected, because you treat them a certain way, because there is unconscious bias, because you're not doing things that adhere to their religion, sexual preference? You know, whenever you show somebody who works in your destination or in your organization or at your business, do you always show them being of color? Like, it's so many different things to think about, but it really comes back to unconscious bias and privilege, and understanding how people perceive things. And, you know, for multicultural travelers just in general, we're all 70% more likely to go to places where we see ourselves reflected, and not only as the help, where we see ourselves reflected, where you say, yes, you know, as a Pacific Asian Islander traveler, we have stuff here for wellness that might adhere to some type of trauma that your community might go through. Or as a Muslim traveler during Ramadan, our place here makes sure that we won't put you next to the kitchen, or we won't put you next to this, but when 7 o'clock hits and the sun goes down, we'll make sure that you have a proper amount of food and anything that you need, or we'll make sure that you have your prayer rooms. It's mindfulness and making sure that everybody is always adhered to. And I never think that it's hard, but I also say that internally, if your staff is not diverse, what you put out externally is not going to be diverse. So it's really a call to the industry to do better, to hold each other accountable so that we can adhere to all travelers everywhere.
Well said. Thank you, Martinique.
Yeah. So yeah, I totally agree with Martinique as well with this. I wanted to start my thing with, we really have to represent the communities that we operate in. And if you're not doing that, well, what was the point of traveling to that destination if I'm just going to see the same sort of people I'm seeing in my own community? And for us at Peninsula, we've been working with, we're doing a lot of these other projects, a lot of other hotels are doing, but there's one project that we're so proud of, and that's our refugee project. It's a project where when we have asylum seekers getting into the countries we operate in, we want to be able to help them with their first step and assimilating into that country. And what we're finding is there's a lot of stigma that comes with being a refugee and an asylum seeker, and it's already so difficult to get into a new country, and you didn't want to leave your country in the first place. And so what we've been doing is providing opportunities to these people, and at the same time, what we're showing our guests is we're all about belongingness and openness, right? And if that doesn't show off in our staff makeup, that's an issue. That's number one. And number two, for our own staff, what we're finding as well is they're becoming more aware about issues that affect their community. For a lot of our staff, before we started our refugee program, they had a very stereotypical view of what it was like to be a refugee, which is, you know, pretty much like, why would you come here? Why would you come here illegally? But having a personal relationship with someone who's gone through that own personal experience then helps them understand, oh, it's a bit more complicated than this. And they become the refugee's best ambassador because they have a personal relationship, and having that conversation as well with the guests. And because the guests are like, you know, who are these people? What are they doing here? And having staff actually say, look, we're very proud of this program. So I'm just using that as an example of, you know, just kind of really putting some tangibleness into what we mean by diversity and inclusion, and putting in a social issue along with that.
That's really impressive. That's a brand initiative. That's a global brand initiative.
We're having it, at the moment, we have it for around 4 or 5 of our operations. The reason we don't have it for the rest of our operations is really it really depends on what the refugee program in each of the countries we operate in. If they have a very open refugee policy, refugee program, it's much easier for us to implement. But if it's more restrictive, there are some countries that don't provide work permits to these refugees. They don't allow them to work. So our hands are a bit tied when it comes to that. So in that situation, we try to do some training programs just to get them ready when they move on to another country where they're able to work.
Got it. Great. Thank you.
Yeah. The industry itself, the companies that are trying to be regenerative or sustainable, I mean, I would challenge them to look at, like, what are they doing to guide or empower travelers into a deeper understanding or awareness of this, right? If we're looking at travel as a series of connections and opportunity to build relations, right? You start with being introspective and traveling from the inside out. And then you start to engage with others and you realize there's an opportunity to learn and grow and connect with others. And I think that is an opportunity, when you look at, if you're trying to understand self through travel, you really can't understand self until you connect and understand your perception of others, right? So you really start to strip down, you get to know your identity, you start to understand what your privilege is. Then you understand what what might be conditioned racism, what might be the biases, right? And then you start opening up to the destination and the people there in a much more authentic and genuine way that ends up breaking down these divisions that are between us, but ultimately are within us.
Well said. Very well said.
Mm.
And Dana?
This is very basic. A lot of what has been said is true. We do a lot of outreach in our community. We also work directly with our staff, but one of the things that we always encourage our employees and our guests to do is interact. We never will ever tell an employee they must not talk to a guest and they must get to work. So one of the great opportunities for people to interact is where they meet one another. So if we have someone raking the beach and a guest talks with them, that is a meaningful opportunity to learn from one another and to respect one another. We will never tell them, stop doing your job, stop talking to a guest, do your job, because we think those interactions are critical. Another thing that we do is we have a workplace wellness program. I think it's if we talk about wellness programs for our guests, but we also need to recognize that our teams have very real issues. And one of the things that we do is each month we have we partner with a local NGO and they come in and they do basic health checks for our guests. And then there's for our employees, and there is a topic of the month related to a health issue. It could be mental health, it could be AIDS awareness, it could be breast cancer. And so it's an opportunity for them to learn about this. And then what they do is they then spread that out to their families and their communities. So it's been a surprisingly impactful program that we have done that really is quite simple. And I think addressing mental health is another aspect that can greatly improve our employees and the destination, because it's a stigma here for where I am currently in the United States. In a lot of other destinations, it's even a greater stigma.
Well said, Dan. That's incredible, all the work you do, incredible. So then, how can hotels and travel companies take an active approach in communicating regeneration to all stakeholders, to staff, to guests, suppliers, PR channels, etc.? So how can the company take a really active approach in communicating regeneration to all stakeholders?
Can I address that one? I really think the emphasis is less on communication as on modeling. I'm a great believer that people will follow what you do rather than follow what you talk about. And my only concern at the moment, to just throw a stick into the water perhaps, is that we're a lot of us are very proud to talk about being regenerative, but what really matters is what are we doing to revitalize our communities, revitalize our natural world, etc. So I think there's a real opportunity to put the focus initially on getting down and dirty and doing it with passion, and that passion and that caring is what will communicate to the guest. It has to have authenticity, it has to have integrity. So we tend as an industry, I would argue, to be mostly marketers and great PR people and fantastic at getting messages out there. But we haven't always, if I can appear to be negative, we haven't always done what we talk about. So that's something we must learn to do.
I think that's really true. I also think there's two areas that perhaps appear opposing, and one is it's the numbers. I think we all need to get better at rationalizing the results of what we're doing, and put numbers and data out there which is indicative of results that we're creating. I know that's pretty dry, but I think that's really helpful in the communication piece of it. And the other thing is, as you said, is how do you touch people's hearts? Which is the kind of the absolute opposite to a data-driven approach. But how do you everyone's talking about connection and reconnection today. I mean, these are the words that have come out of COVID. They happen to be part of our mission and have been for 20 years or so. But like one of the things we've been doing in the past 3 or 4 months is each hotel has been creating rituals for our guests, which every property has been charged to come up with 2 or 3 different rituals that really reflect who they are, where they are, what they care about, and to really have that show up on arrival and the guest experience, on departure or during the stay. But these are things that are really heartwarming and touching and demonstrate culture and really have a role. So I think there's 2 sides of that answer to the question that really gets the story out there.
That I agree with. What about communicating? The kind of digital arrival experience or social media. Martinique, that's something you're very much involved in. You're content creating. You are. How can we communicate this idea of regenerative travel in a way that we're not banging people over the head with the message, that we're still having fun and that we're still remaining aspirational?
Sorry, I keep putting myself on mute because we're like in the middle of a storm and it's very distracting, but I keep trying to take myself off of mute when you're ready to talk. But anyway, sorry about that. I find that a lot of companies think that they have to change their messaging if they include diverse audiences. And I always tell them, you don't have to change your messaging. You can keep your same exact messaging, but show somebody new. And that's one way to, connect with the inclusive community online, because like I keep saying, everybody wants to feel wanted. Everybody wants to think that you're speaking to them. And if you're trying to also reach new demographics still with this common theme, a way to do that is to show different types of people in your space. So, like I said before, keeping diversity and inclusion at top of mind at all times is the way to, get to new customer markets, but to help your company grow, because people want to see themselves reflected. So for example, a lot of people count out blind travelers. They think because they can't see that they don't want to do the same thing that people who see do. And it's like, this is so untrue. And they still want people to be able to speak to them, not only in their out text that comes with their social media, but, where they use somebody in that actual community to get the message across, or to be able to talk about an experience, a heartfelt, purpose-driven experience that they came to from visiting your destination or from visiting your business. So I always say those are always ways to continue the conversation, but to also enter in some new markets. People say, well, how do we do that authentically? Because all of a sudden I'm just going to show a Black family, or all of a sudden I'm going to show a plus size person, or all of a sudden I'm going to show, you know, a person in a wheelchair who's visiting my property. It's like, no, it's not all of a sudden. It's that you treat them like they're regular people, because they are. So I said, you keep the same messaging, but you use somebody that your community or your followers aren't used to normally seeing on your platform, so they understand we have this at the top of mind. We want to show everybody that they're welcome here. So I always say, do as much as you can, but step outside of the box of just seeing yourself. Step outside of everybody who you think, okay, who could come here and who are we built here for? If you have bathrooms or rooms that are wheelchair accessible, why aren't you showing that in your media, or why aren't you showing that in your marketing? You know, if you have a program for seniors, why aren't you showing that in your marketing? If you have a programs for seniors who are widows, why aren't you showing that in your marketing, so that they understand we get you, or we understand what you might be going through, and this is a safe place for you. We want you here. So I said, always diversity, inclusion, top of mind. That is the way to move forward, just 24/7, especially now, even after COVID, when everybody has positioned themselves as an ally, and not just for the Black community, but for everybody. So if you're saying you're ally, it's not something you turn on and off. It's something that you are for the rest of your life now, you know? And sometimes it does mean that you'll lose friends, you'll lose opportunities, you'll lose customers, but then you have to ask yourself, do you want those type of customers anyways, who don't see that diversity and inclusion is important to your brand? So that's the way I would move forward with that.
Well
said.
said.
Martinique, go. I love it. What a great group. You know, I think that we're all trying to deliver deep and more meaningful experiences in travel. You know, so when we talk about integrating regenerative practices or embracing a transformative mindset, you know, like that's going to help us have deeper, more meaningful experiences. And getting buy-in, I think, is the key. You know, and that goes beyond education, and I think it becomes an embodiment. You know, I think that the hotels or the organizations that do pursue this, they embody this. It's at their essence. You know, so that means that they really have to uncover their why. What is their connection? As Neil said, where do their hearts lead them? You know, and I think that's going to increase the vibrational frequency of the place, and people are going to have deeper experiences.
Well said. Anybody else? Janice, on communication?
I think with us, it's not really just bombarding guests with information. Look at what we're doing in here. Look we're doing here. I don't think guests are going to engage with that. It's really, for us, it's all about storytelling and story living. And it's just kind of what Anna was saying as well. Don't just say you're going to do something, actually let the guests experience it. And that's why for us, I keep telling our teams, storytelling, story living. What's the point of telling the story if the guests can't actually live it? And so and the thing about storytelling, it's something that humans have used for generations. When you actually explain regeneration, sustainability, which is very esoteric and, you know, just so, you know, so nebulous, like it's so hard. How are you going to explain this to the guests? And I don't think they make decisions based on whether, they don't make decisions if they see the word regeneration. I don't think they'll say, what is that? Like, let me go and have that. But when you tell them what they're going to get out of it from a story point of view, they actually want to live it. So this is kind of what we're thinking on our end anyway at Peninsula. Just, you know, when we're talking about sustainability, we're also thinking like, why would the guests care about this? Why would the guests care where the food comes from? Why would the guests care about the chemicals we use in the room? But when we create it as a story that benefits the guests and also the communities that they come and visit, I find that the guests really see it as much more powerful and something that they can really relate to. And when we tell them, they're actually like, really? I didn't know about this. And it's really this, I mean, we're talking about hazardous chemicals or cleaning chemicals. I never even thought that a guest would be interested in that until you actually contextualize it into part of their experience.
Well said, absolutely. So then, you know, given the people on this panel, what do you feel that is the role of luxury in regenerative travel? Because obviously the Peninsula, Six Senses, the luxury brands. Dana, I'm sure your little place in Belize is not too shabby. So, you know, what is the role of luxury in regenerative travel?
Well,
regenerative travel. It could just be regeneration. What's the role of luxury in today's world? Well, you know, with regards to regeneration.
I think, you know, those of us that are functioning at that level of the market obviously have a client base that is well heeled, is able to afford to stay with us. And I certainly think that what we're finding and what we try and encourage is that to reach a constituency that you know certainly has the wherewithal, but also recognizes that they have a role and a responsibility to contribute as a result of their fortune, if you like, or as a result of their financial ability to do so. So I mean, we kind of go out somewhat aggressively around that and are looking and communicating to people and providing programming that allows people to, our guests, to contribute to the communities where we function in one form or another. While at the same time, I think that we can create the level of programming at our level of the industry that also has them gives them a great takeaway at the same time. So a little like I was saying earlier, that it becomes a win-win, an absolute win-win for both sides. And to have that content that attracts that type of person and has them participate in activities that really give back to the communities that we function in. I think that maybe is a little easier at our level of the market.
Mm-hmm. So luxury really does have a responsibility. Janice, do you feel the same with Peninsula?
Totally. I think for us, as part, in a way, I know a lot of brands look up to our brand as well. And if we're able to show them that this is something that we could do, hopefully we give confidence to the rest of the industry that, you know, you should definitely do refugee programs. You should definitely do this sustainability program. And I'm actually finding this in our work. When we want to be, like for me personally, I want to be able to leverage the brands that I work with and show them that this is something that can be aspirational. Because when people think about sustainability or regeneration, they think, oh, is that like hemp, bamboo and all that? It's not very luxurious. It's just a perception that it's not. But when we show them at the Peninsula, like sustainability is luxury, and we want to show you that, then it starts to change a perception. And even our guests will see, wow, I definitely want to use, you know, non-plastic, single-use plastic items. And it becomes you're starting to change that mindset. And I think that's the whole point of luxury. Luxury is all about aspiration, right? Luxury is all about the perception of beauty and excellence. And if we're able to connect those connotations to sustainability and to regeneration, then we've actually done a lot to move the needle in terms of regenerative travel.
Well said, Janice.
Could I add to that? I think that luxury itself is going to experience a broader definition. Yeah. Being in unspoiled nature and experiencing its magnificence and having that sense of wonder and awe and just intimacy, that's a luxury for so many of us. It's no longer obviously about gold taps and, you know, finest furnishings. The glamping world has shown that, I think. But to me, so the other luxury right now that COVID has surely shown the importance of, and that is just health. Are we healthy? Are we happy? Are we whole? Are we flourishing as individuals and as communities? So I think, yes, the current luxury brands do have this amazing responsibility, but also opportunity to be the leaders here. But I do think we can communicate that you can have a luxurious experience at anywhere if you have the right mindset and if people in the hosts have a similar mindset.
Beautifully said, Anna. Very well said. I agree.
Can I chime in briefly, then? Go ahead, Dana.
just add to that, I think as we're all stuck in our homes so much more, there is a luxury of being immersed in nature and having connections, safe, socially distanced connections. And I believe that that is something that a luxury property is able to offer a bit more. And I fully agree with the concept of luxury and what is luxury is shifting. I'll tell you a short story. The Belize government was trying to set standards and ratings, you know, the typical star ratings, and they were following Mexico's guidelines. And some of the ticks that they wanted us to check off to rate our hotels was included, do you have TVs in your room? Are you providing slippers for all your guests? You know, things like that. And we said, no, this is not who we are. This is not who our customer is. This is not what we want to offer them, and they don't want that either. And we're on the beach, for heaven's sakes, no one needs slippers. And it took that re-educating the tourism board that no, we are offering a different product, and it is luxurious, but it's different, as you said, from the gold taps. And I think that shift is occurring in the marketplace. There's always a place for the other, but what we're talking about regenerative travelers, and I think they want something more, something deeper. And then just a practical note, to do all these programs and these outreach and whatnot, they do cost money and time. And quite frankly, a higher end hotel that is earning a greater room night revenue is going to have a little more capacity to do that than a lower end. And I think that's just being honest about the pure business facts of it. And I would also say that luxury tends to lead. It kind of pulls the market in many ways. It does this in fashion and other industries. So we do have a role and a responsibility in shifting that narrative.
Very well said. Jake, I know you're chomping at the bit. Go for it.
Can you tell? Listen, we're trying to change the world. Travel can do that, you know, and I think that starts with changing minds. And I think the luxury sector has a tremendous responsibility in changing the minds of their market and their guests and their travelers. You know, we want to influence the influencers, and change is going to have to start with them, because they're ultimately the ones that are going to drive a lot more of the choices because they have influence, and that's going to trickle down. But that modeling, that opportunity that exists in changing minds of some of these luxury travelers is a powerful one. And, you know, I would love to challenge, you know, the luxury brands to take real responsibility and, you know, adjusting their own value proposition and shifting more on values.
Well said.
I think it's happening, you know. I mean, there are people out there that are leaders in the space, but I think it's really happening, and I think it's a really exciting time for those of us in that end of the industry, because the demand is there, and it just over the past few years, just to see how that is escalating, and to see how, you know, what we do in those areas of sustainability and wellness is compelling. And people want it. And coming back, I think, to what I said earlier, that the consciousness is there. People want to connect. People want the social aspect of it. They want to learn, and they want to give. And I think the whole concept of traditional luxury that many great hotel companies have embodied over the years is something that is changing, and unless those groups do something different, they will become redundant. I know for us personally, we don't even like to use the word luxury because it has that connotation that everyone has been saying about, you know, gold taps and excess. This luxury should not be about excess. And that's the shift in the high-end part of the industry. It has to be honest, and it has to come from a culture that resonates and that is compelling within the organization. And if that culture exists, it will come across as honest and truthful and will have impact on the customer and have that customer come back time and time again. So it's a great circle.
I think it's brilliant, Neil, and you at Sixth Senses are very much leading by example, and I think it's an opportunity to assess what luxury means and also what luxury doesn't mean, because you're right, nobody really needs a gold tap or a fine furnishing, maybe occasionally a fine furnishing, but never a gold tap. But, you know, look at what doesn't represent luxury. Plastic doesn't represent luxury. If I check into a hotel, and I checked into a nice hotel, I got upgraded, and there were 11 plastic water bottles in my room. And so I called down to the front desk, put the plastic water bottles outside the room and said, please bring me a jug of filtered water in a glass bottle. And of course, the next day they'd replaced all 11 bottles in the room. And so, there are certain things that don't represent luxury, like plastic, like, in my opinion, meat-heavy restaurants in hotels. People that have a bit of sensitivity towards the environment are not going to have a meat-heavy hotel. They're going to have a plant-forward menu. There is going to be this kind of holistic sense of wellness where you can get a green juice, where there is where people can continue their their lives, their lives that they have outside of a hotel. So they can pick up on their fitness regime, or they can spoil themselves to a treatment or beyond. Or as Neil was saying, rituals are something that pre-pandemic was something that we, when I was with Edition, focused on an enormous amount because it makes people feel great, and it doesn't have to be expensive. It doesn't have to be the gold tap of rituals. It can just, it just be something that really surprises and entices somebody, thoughtfulness, I think, is something we've all touched upon, which it doesn't necessarily cost a lot of money. To Dana's point, you're absolutely right. Those hotels that traditionally can afford to give that kind of guest service are the ones that drive a high rate. Well, that's not necessarily true, because I would be blown away if somebody. I checked into a hotel recently. I'm on a bit of a freedom tour since leaving my real job, and I checked into a hotel recently, and the hotel manager and I. The hotel owner and I know each other, but we never actually met. We'd met kind of virtually. Anyway, his daughter had drawn a card for me and left that in the room, and it just blew me away. Like, some things just don't cost money, and that just blew my mind. And it was really fun. It wasn't like, it was really fun and a little obscure and funny. And he said, look, she really wanted to do it because she'd seen me interview him on something like this. And so there is this sense of luxury, this new sense of luxury, and we're I guess we are entering a rather disastrous but also quite exciting new period for travel and hospitality, where we get to do new things, and where we and you get to redefine what luxury means and what people want. Anyway, I'm the moderator, so I'm gonna move on very quickly. Yeah. Neil, surprisingly,
you're on a roll, Ben. You're on a roll.
I'm very passionate about this stuff.
Good. We like passion. Passion is the new luxury.
Yeah. Well said, Anne. Okay, so we only have a few minutes left. I'm very conscious of the time, but I would just like to know from you. Now, it doesn't necessarily need to be in the travel and hospitality sector, but who is leading the way? Who can we look to for inspiration and guidance at a time when we need it most? Martinique, I want to start with you, or do you want me to come back to you? You're thinking. Jake, I know you've got an answer to this. Who is leading the way? Who in the world is leading the way? Please let us know.
Well, I think a lot of the people in this group, matter of fact, and when it comes to regenerative tourism, regenerative practices, I'd say that Anna Pollock leads the way, and her colleague and partner in crime, Michelle Holiday. I think the two of them, you know, from a B2B or industry perspective, you know, they've been preaching this for quite some time, and it's taken a pandemic to get some of the rest of us to wake up. You know, I think that from a traveler perspective, I don't think that there is anybody leading the way yet, and I think that there's going to be organizations and companies that really step into that, and can be a guiding light for them. But I can't think of one specific one that is available to travelers right now. So I challenge everybody that's listening to step forward.
Anybody? Who's leading the way?
Ben, I think I agree with Jake. For the travel industry, definitely a tough one. But if there was someone not in the travel industry that we look up to, the likes of Patagonia, for example, I mean, they are like, don't buy my jacket. And it's almost like, what? But what was the point of you being in business anyway? It's so, you know, a bit of jarring, some of their messaging, but also quite honest. And I think that's what we really need right now. I think that is what it takes to be a leader. A leader is not only just showing the way, but also telling you the truth. And you may not want to hear that truth.
Very true. Very true. Anna, what's your opinion?
Did you say me?
Yes. Who do you think is leading the way? Who can we look to for inspiration and guidance at a time when we need it most?
Well, I agree with Jake. I mean, you know, regenerative hotels are one in the hotel sector because they've you know, you're flying the flag. Are in a sense showing huge leadership. Let's face it, regeneration is a fundamentally new word. It's the buzzword of the year, which worries the hell out of me because if we use it too much, it's going to lose its meaning. It's the most potent idea available at the moment to get us out of the fix we're in. The other thing I would say is that we tend to look for bigness in leadership is success, is getting lots of attention. But the reality is that a lot of the really good work is happening by individuals doing brave things in their particular community or establishment and often not getting noticed at all. I was just thinking yesterday, a guy called Christian de Boer who was with Shintamani. He really impressed me about 5, 6, 7 years ago because he was doing what I would call regeneration. But he didn't call it that because no one used the term. He completely turned around that particular property because he really put his people, his employees first and made sure they had a year-round job. And then he invested in a major program from plastic to refill, all of those kind of things. So he was a leader, but didn't necessarily get to the kind of attention that some brands that can buy a lot of PR can achieve. So let's support the unsung heroes out there doing it, because they're the ones that are providing the evidence that this stuff actually works.
Very well said.
I think, go ahead.
To your point, no act of sustainability or regeneration is too small. So
No.
whether it's adopting a plant-forward diet or implementing a no plastic campaign in your property or hotel, no act is too small. Very well said. So before we leave, I'd just like to provide a little summary, mainly about luxury, because I found that fascinating. Portia, bear with me 1 second. So luxury, we have a responsibility. We all have a responsibility to remain aspirational with the luxury brands that we have jurisdiction over. Inclusion and diversity should always be top of mind, and that goes for everybody. Communication needs to be spoken like a real human, not like a fashion shoot. The new luxury, nature and well-being rather than gold taps and fine furnishings. I'm going to write that on my wall, I think. Well, very well said. And then we all have a responsibility to redefine luxury and help to continually inspire and to change people's minds. Thank you all very, very much for joining. And sorry if I've gone a little bit over, but thank you. Brilliant.
No need to apologize.
Thanks.
Thanks, Ben. Thanks, everybody.
Everyone.
Thank you.
Guys, what an amazing panel. I know you're probably not all following the Q&A, but it's not many Q, it's just a lot of comments saying that this has been the most enjoyable panel of the entire conference. So what a fantastic way for us to close. Thank you all so much. I have nearly lost my head and nearly fell off from just nodding so often to everything that was being said. It's been 3 days, the first time that we've ever put on something like this. Anna, you are absolutely right. Any buzzword is in danger of losing its meaning. But I hope that these 3 days have really put the word regenerative just in people's vocabulary and in everyone's vocabulary. I have got better at saying it. I still mess it up from time to time. Over 40 panelists have contributed. So I'm saying thank you to the 7 of you, but also thank you to everybody else who's made these 3 days happen. We've had over 1,700 participants, which I think makes us even more popular than Matter. And it couldn't have happened without Amanda, who is not on because she's too shy, but this really was Amanda, one of the co-founders of Regenerative Travel's baby. She and Alex Avila at Rare Communications have really masterminded this. So an enormous thanks to them. And also to Harshal Akwa from Syra Hospitality, who are our other partner for the summit. I think I will leave it because who could say anything better than the people that we've just listened to? But if we can take away something from all of this, I think it's be kind, be aware, think beyond yourself, whether you are a hotelier, a member of the media, a traveler, consider yourself as a human and treat others in the world the way that you expect to be treated. And something that I'm certainly going to say to myself every day, no act is too small. So thank you, and I hope to see you on another summit of this caliber next year.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Bye-bye.